All right, you and I are about to see the ultimate betrayal in a world of undead. When the scourge began, Arthur built a sanctuary. But everything fell apart when they rescued Alina, a girl whose beauty was just a mask for her poisonous heart. See, she was actually a spy who opened the fortress gates at midnight. Now he was hanging over a pit of monsters, while his lady clung to another man. She laughed in his face, while his loyal knights lay dead in the mud around him. It was all Arthur's fault for falling for those eyes. Now, all he could do was curse her soul and pray for her ruin. But that serpent didn't care, since she had Lord 𝑭𝒐𝒂𝒚𝒆𝒅's protection now. The brute 𝑭𝒐𝒂𝒂𝒚𝒆𝒅 thanked him for the supplies and pulled the lever, dropping Arthur into a swarm of starving ghouls. He wanted a future with her, but he ended up as monster fodder instead. Now pay attention, in his final breath, he vowed revenge. Then his eyes snapped open. He was back in the past, and she was right there in front of him. He'd barely woken up when she started nagging him about the 400,000 gold crowns for their dowry. But this time is different. He won't let a pretty face lead him to the slaughter again. To be fair, we've all been there. Who hasn't been blinded by a beautiful smile? But Arthur is finally playing for keeps. He wanted to crush her then and there, but that's too easy. He just kicked her out. The girl was stunned. He used to be her loyal lapdog, but now, the wolf has finally woken up. He has 1 month before the undead arrive, and this time, something has changed. A divine system appeared, offering rewards and power-ups in exchange for points. He's going to be absolutely unstoppable. First stop, the local tavern. He ordered the finest feast and the most expensive wine. He hadn't eaten a real meal in years. As he's devouring the food, his message stone glows. It was Alina's annoying friend calling to bark at him. Arthur just tells her to go rot in a dungeon and hangs up. He finally let out all that poison he'd been holding inside. Now he needs a fortress. That very afternoon, he heads straight to the king's estate office. The young clerk is helpful, but the arrogant manager interrupts. He starts berating the girl and tells her to go move crates. She tries to explain she has a client, but the man says not to waste time on beggars. He even brags that if Arthur buys a single acre, he'll eat horse dung in the town square. Arthur just laughs. Now watch this. He pulls out his royal gold and says he's here for the land. Everyone is speechless. That amount of gold is legendary. The girl quickly brings the ledgers for the open estates. He looks them over, but tells her he has very specific needs for his new home. The land must be nestled in the mountains, with a constant source of fresh water. It absolutely needs to have large, working smithies too. The clerk thinks it's a strange request, but says she'll search the maps. Suddenly, the manager mocks him, mentioning an estate in the East District that's way out of his league. Arthur asks if it fits the bill. The girl admits it's perfect, though the workshops were never finished. He doesn't care. Arthur buys it on the spot and tells the manager to start getting his meal ready. The gold was paid. The manager was losing his mind that Arthur spent 300,000 on half-finished ruins. Before walking out, Arthur says he's looking forward to the show. The other nobles in the shop start laughing. One even jokes that he had a rich dinner and asks if the manager wants leftovers. And just like that, the first mission was done. He used the wedding gold to fund it. Suddenly, that brute 𝑭𝒐𝒂𝒚𝒆𝒅 from his past life walks right past him. Arthur freezes for a second. He sees the manager and 𝑭𝒐𝒂𝒚𝒆𝒅 together. You can bet your life on this. The revenge tour is just starting. The scene shifts to Alina. She gets a message that Arthur actually went and bought an estate. That definitely gets her attention immediately. She asks how he could afford it, and her friend says he spent their wedding fund. Alina is livid that her gold was stolen. Instead of helping, her friend tells her to go confront him. Meanwhile, Arthur is planning his next move. Trust me, we're about to see how he builds his empire. Arthur needs gold for his fortress. You and I are about to watch this get very intense very quickly. It is not the town guard, just 2 noblewomen fuming over how he spent Lady Alina's gold. Arthur is baffled by their arrival, but Alina cuts him off. She screams that he used her gold to buy the estate, then even claims the land belongs to her. Arthur finds the entire situation absolutely ridiculous. He tosses a bag of gold at her feet, refusing to live on a woman's coin. Then he reveals the big secret. He knows she's been seeing Baron Sterling. She stands frozen in shock. Her friend Isabella quickly tries to play it off as a simple lover's quarrel that they can just talk through. Arthur is not falling for it. He calls Alina out for betraying him with that wealthy old fool. He slams the door and orders them away. Remarkably, Alina does not even feel guilty about what she did. She only cares about how he uncovered her secret. Even Isabella is horrified, having no clue about the affair, and she's utterly disgusted it was with that ancient Baron Sterling. Isabella realizes they have lost all leverage over Arthur for now, meaning they will need a new strategy. You see, Isabella has been waiting for her own golden opportunity. Pay attention now. Isabella wants Arthur for herself. Leaving the chaos behind, Arthur heads out to oversee his ruined fortress. The master builder warns that the ruin needs heavy renovation and complex magical defenses, so the work will take months. With the insane defenses Arthur demands, even the hardened stonemasons think it is complete overkill. Still, he commands it finished in 1 month. The builder scoffs, saying that is impossible with their current crew. Then he admits gold can fix anything. To rush the work, he demands 20 million gold sovereigns. Arthur does not even blink. He simply asks for a final quote. The builder demands 5 million gold coins up front just to begin the labor. Arthur agrees, promising to deliver the gold within a week if they start immediately. The master builder is left completely stunned. Arthur even pledges to forfeit the entire estate if he fails to pay. His confidence is absolutely unshakable. The deal is signed, but their conversation is suddenly interrupted by Alina's treacherous friend, Isabella. She approaches him with a fake smile and grabs his arm. Arthur is deeply disgusted, remembering how she helped steal his family inheritance in his past life. He will have his revenge later, but for now, he coldly asks what she wants. She ignores his tone and asks if this is his new estate, wondering if he is building a grand villa. Done with the games, Arthur pulls away and tells her to mind her own business. She is furious at his icy rejection. Arthur turns back to the stonemasons, ordering a wider gatehouse. Being ignored makes Isabella boil with pure frustration. She knows Alina's bridge is burned, so she still believes she can seduce him for the fortune. Back at his manor, Arthur tries mortgaging the property. It is not enough for the deposit, so he starts planning bigger schemes. You and I know the end is coming, so he sells his manor to several buyers at once. His focus is broken by an old noble pounding on the door, screaming for him to open up. It is his greedy neighbor, Lord Harlan, who already owns the lower floors and now wants Arthur's townhouse as well. In the previous life, Arthur clung to this house, hoping it would be his future wedding home. But after the betrayal and Harlan's constant badgering, Arthur decides it is time for a change of plans. Lord Harlan scolds him for late-night revelry, but Arthur flatly denies the old man's accusations. Instead of fighting, Arthur suddenly agrees to sell. That instantly shifts the old noble's grumpy mood. Harlan is shocked, but Arthur has one condition. His new estate won't be ready for 6 months, so he needs 5 million gold coins up front to clear his debts. If Lord Harlan refuses, Arthur is perfectly happy to walk away from the deal. At the last second, the old man agrees, demanding a legal contract to prevent any future trouble. Arthur does not mind at all, knowing Harlan won't survive the coming disaster anyway. Now, everything is falling into place. He will soon have 5 million from Harlan. Combined with his other funds, he now has 8 million gold. Since he has completed the first trial's requirement, he can finally claim his mystical reward. Next, Arthur storms through the market district, buying up every scrap of food at high speed. Locals whisper that he has gone mad. It makes sense, considering he is hauling 7 overflowing carts of supplies. Some merchants think he is scared of end-of-the-world rumors. Arthur ignores them and finishes his second task. Arthur chooses the hero's toolbox over strength. Trust me, You and I are going to love what happens next." A glowing treasure box appears. Leo finds a powerful void ring that keeps items frozen in time. "Trust me, you and I would kill for a reward like that." He never has to worry about his rations spoiling again. But the architect isn't done yet. It demands 10 years of supplies, instead of one if he wants more essence. His massive gold spending draws the royal guards to handle the disturbance. Arthur is stunned to see Leo standing there. Back at the academy, Arthur was a bully who tormented everyone, including our main character. Now he's shouting again, ordering Leo to leave instead of causing trouble. Leo just smiles and says Arthur has not changed at all. Leo offers to pay in full, but Arthur thinks he's bluffing and demands the gold now. An hour later, 4 scribes finally finish tallying every single item. The bill is 57,000 gold. Arthur orders him to pay immediately, but Leo calmly presents his crest and the vault opens. Humiliated, Arthur tries to tuck tail and run with his men, but Leo stops him. Leo says Arthur was rude for no reason, so he demands a proper apology or he will return everything. Arthur is absolutely furious. He thinks Leo is picking a fight, but with witnesses everywhere. Now watch this. The other shoppers side with Leo and pressure Arthur to apologize before he is shamed. Leo reminds him that a sorry won't kill him. He even promises to buy 10 times more if the bully bows. Arthur thinks it is nonsense, so Leo reveals his massive treasury balance and pays again. The bully is left completely stunned. He cannot believe Leo has 7 million gold just sitting in a vault. With no way to save face, Leo forces the embarrassed Arthur to apologize. The bully finally snaps and bows his head in shame. To make it worse, Leo pats his head like a dog and tells him not to be rude. As Arthur leaves, he asks why Leo needs so much. Leo just brushes him off. It is none of his business. He is planning something massive. Now much more respectful, the manager says massive orders like this need a wholesaler. Leo asks if Arthur knows any trade guilds. Arthur mentions their old academy leader, 𝑑𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂, who now runs a massive trade guild. Arthur even calls the Duke about a major client. Leo is surprised this jerk still follows the same boss and wonders how much they have stolen together. A bit later, Arthur leads him straight to the boss. "You and I both know what is coming next." A carriage speeds up, and out steps the same arrogant noble, 𝑨𝒑𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂. He demands to see this big client, while Arthur explains that Leo is their old classmate. But too much time has passed for 𝑨𝒑𝒂𝒂𝒂 to remember him. After staring a while, it finally clicks. It is the kid who always stood up to them and refused orders. 𝑨𝒑𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂 mocks Leo's tunic as a fake, and Leo just plays dumb. That calm reaction makes 𝑨𝒑𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂 think this was a waste of time. No way this kid is rich. He literally kicks Arthur and claims he can spot a true noble just by looking at them. Leo mocks him back, saying his aura is too weak to scare anyone. Provoked, 𝑨𝒑𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂 grabs his collar. Leo doesn't flinch at all. Funnily enough, 𝑨𝒑𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂 only gets mad about being called an idiot. He ignores the part about acting superior. Arthur tries to intervene, but gets another kick for his trouble. Furious, 𝑨𝒑𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂 warns Leo he will not leave in one piece unless he buys half the warehouse. Leo stays calm and shows off his golden treasury. The Duke is absolutely floored. Leo is ready to drop 1 million gold as a deposit. The full order, 5 million gold coins. Suddenly interested, 𝑨𝒑𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂 asks what he needs. Leo says he wants anything people can eat or drink. Even with a massive client, the greedy boss plans to dump his nearly spoiled rations on him. At the trade guild, 𝑨𝒑𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂 shows the stock and offers 10% off for the whole pile, but Leo only cares about high quality. He checks one crate and quickly exposes the scam. Most of this food is about to rot. 𝑨𝒑𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂 did not expect Leo to know this trade so well, so he offers 50% off for the lot. Leo refuses again. If he is spending 5 million gold, he wants top-quality goods. Still, he says he has a use for the rot, which confuses the boss. Since the discount was already mentioned, Leo uses it to crush the negotiation. He wants all the spoiled goods too, promising to pay in a month. 𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂 agrees, though he worries Leo might back out once the food truly rots. Leo offers his manor as collateral, which makes the boss even more curious about the plan. Trust me, you and I are about to see this world flip. In days, even rot will become a royal luxury. You and I are about to watch 𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂 terrify the merchant while closing the deal and promising the delivery address later. Just then, 𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂 receives a message. Someone wants to purchase his family estate. He finishes up at the granary and leaves the rest to his men, while Lord Thorn wonders if he was the one being played. Even Lord Thorn is baffled. How does a regular lad throw around millions of gold pieces so casually? Next, the buyer sends a 400,000 gold deposit for the manor, agreeing to let 𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂 stay there for 3 more months. 𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂 clearly does not care about the future, because the world is about to fall into ruin anyway, though the buyer's desperation surprises him. The man did not even inspect the manor before paying the gold, so 𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂 asks him why. The old man explains it is for his granddaughter who needs a safe place near the capital. They loved the estate, so they made an offer. 𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂 jokingly wonders if he should raise the price, scaring the poor old man, before assuring him he will keep the original deal. They sign the parchment, and the sale is finally complete. The old man thanks him warmly, promising to stay out of his way, but the moment hits 𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂 hard. He knows that people like this old man and his grandchild will never survive when the Great Scourge arrives. Wanting to do one last kindness, he asks for their current address before returning to the construction site to check on his fortress. The first payment cleared, but the captain of the guard is already hoping for the second bag of gold. 𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂 promises it is coming and asks for an update. The work is already 80% finished. The reinforced gates are set for a solid defense, and the armory is cleared. Satisfied, 𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂 orders Sir Alistair to move all the goods in immediately. Soon, the crates arrive and are stacked neatly. 𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂 even pays each worker 2,000 gold just for their hard labor. While they celebrate, he helps sort everything, making sure the perishable food is stored properly. By nightfall, all the sorting is done. 𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂 looks over everything with a sense of pride. At last, he has gathered 10 years of supplies and earned 20 more points, seeing another mystery box available in the ancient shop. Now watch this. 𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂 can actually gain powers before the Great Scourge even begins. He spends 10 points on a magic box and unlocks the Mind's Eye, an ability that lets him sense hostility and bad intentions. That will be incredibly useful in the coming apocalypse. Then, the ancient system gives him a brand new task. Armed with supplies, he now needs to collect a massive hoard of weapons, which was exactly what 𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂 wanted anyway. That night, the story shifts to the shadow market. 𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂 walks through the crowds, listening to talk of stolen relics and antiques. All sorts of shady characters are here, including Sterling, who is arguing with a merchant over the price of a cheap bracelet. Watching him buy fake jewelry confirms 𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂 opinion. This man is a fraud, and Quenya has no idea she is wearing junk. While scouting the stalls, 𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂 finally spots something worth his gold. He stops at a stall selling blades and asks for real steel. The merchant suggests a whetstone or perhaps a simple mace for blunt force. 𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂 needs something far more lethal than that. The merchant assumes he is joking until 𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂 transfers 200,000 gold straight to him, proving he is a serious buyer. Interested now, the merchant tells 𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂 Inside, the man shows off some crude crossbows for 2,000 gold each, but they are too weak to kill. 𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂 He needs weapons meant for the undead, not toys. The merchant then shows him a repeating crossbow worth 5,000 gold. Again, 𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂 especially after paying 200,000 gold as a down payment. That deposit is just a taste. 𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂 reveals the 200,000 gold was only 10% of his budget. He is ready to spend 2 million on top-tier steel. You and I both know that is an insane amount of gold, leaving the merchant baffled while 𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂 reals steal. Ready to show the real goods, the merchant seals up the room to make sure no spies are watching them. He tells Silas he came to the right place because he can connect him with a lord who supplies top-quality steel. The real deal will happen in a few days. When Silas leaves the room, he runs into Sterling once again. The fool assumes Silas must have sold off his family's heirlooms just to afford a decent meal. Silas ignores the bait and tests his new mind's eye. The merchant is clean, showing no ill intent toward him. Sterling, however, is radiating malice, so Silas fires back, saying Quenna's beauty matches those fake bracelets perfectly. They are both cheap trash. That one line sets Sterling off instantly. When the merchant asks if they know each other, Silas says it is better to call him a mortal enemy. Stick around, business starts now. All right, stick with me here. This young noble is about to flip the script on his enemies. The merchant sides with Arthur, offering to punish the old creep. Arthur leaves satisfied, while poor Baron Vane faces a group of mercenaries. They throw him to the cobblestones and beat him until he is covered in bruises. This humiliation fuels his hatred for Arthur, and the noble swears absolute revenge. 2 days later, a full truckload of weapons arrives for Arthur, completing the mission and granting him a physical enhancement potion. This serum has a double effect, way better than the store version. He wastes no time and injects himself immediately. Instantly, his strength surges past the average man. He hits 7 points, a massive 40% boost in power. Checking the shop, he sees only a survival kit and one more physical enhancement potion available for purchase. He buys the potion and injects it too, hungry for more power. Now Arthur hits 8 strength points, making him 60% stronger than any normal human. To test it, he kicks a steel rod so hard it bends and cracks the wall. With this strength, those ghouls are in serious trouble. He stores every weapon crate inside his spatial ring for safekeeping. Taking everything in. Pay attention here, because the apocalypse starts in just 2 days. Arthur needs to tie up loose ends, starting with the old man. Even after being betrayed in his past life, Arthur still wants to help people whenever he can. He plans to give that family enough supplies to survive. Soon enough, Arthur reaches the old man's humble manor. Finding the place was a struggle, and the long climb upstairs shows how difficult the old man's life is. Standing at the door, he unloads the supplies from his ring first to make things easier. Food and crates appear instantly, and then he finally knocks. The old man answers nervously, already apologizing about the late tribute. But he freezes seeing Arthur there, completely shocked by the massive mountain of supplies the young lord brought. Arthur says there is no time to talk. They need to move everything inside right now. Once inside, the old man is stunned by the kid's stamina. Arthur decides the manor is secure enough. He warns the old man to keep quiet about what he is about to hear. He explains they must use these supplies carefully, because the entire world is about to fall into darkness. Then he spots a photo of the granddaughter. To his shock, it is Alara, a friend from his original life. He asks to confirm her identity, and the grandfather is stunned that Arthur already knows her name. Worried, Arthur asks for her location. She is currently at the academy in her hometown, preparing to transfer. In the original timeline, he met her after she lost everything, including her grandfather, to the undead. The old man died protecting her, and Arthur refuses to let that tragedy happen again. He tells him to stay put. The old man starts to panic, but Arthur calms him down with the brutal truth. The world ends tomorrow. Ghouls are coming, and no place will be safe. They must go get Alara before deciding where to hide. The old man can barely process this, but Arthur has to make him understand the gravity of the situation. I know what you are thinking. How do you prove the end is coming? Simple, he vanishes the furniture into his ring. The grandfather is left speechless until Arthur explains he has powers and can see the future. That is why they need to reach Alara's academy immediately. Next, they are racing in their car toward the school. Once they arrive, Arthur finds her dorm and starts searching the halls with the old man. They find Alara getting slapped around by a jealous girl over some boy who likes her. Even though Alara denies everything, the girl hits her again for making excuses. The group keeps bullying her for acting like she does not care. Luckily, her grandpa rushes in to save her. He tells the girl to stop, but violent teens step in and threaten him. For his granddaughter's sake, the old man charges in anyway, ready to face all 3 boys alone. One of them swings a baseball bat at his head, but before the blow can land, Arthur catches his arm and mocks them for acting like thugs when they are just kids. He answers with one brutal kick that drops the guy. The other punks wonder if he is some kind of professional knight. They try to surround him, but Arthur lets them. He easily ducks a swing from his blind side with his enhanced body. His reactions are on a whole other level. He grabs the attacker and slams him into the ground, cold. The leader then tries to sneak up with a knife. But Arthur turns and drives a hard kick right into his thigh. The pain is so intense, the boy drops instantly. And that is where we leave it. Arthur puts the last idiot to sleep and finishes things with one final slap. All right, you and I are about to see Elias lose his cool. He grabs the noble girl by her hair and presses a cold blade to her throat, leaving her trembling. A lightning-fast swing follows, and she lets out a piercing scream. Even Lord Alistair thinks she's dead, but relax, Elias just sliced off her long hair. She shrieks that she'll never forgive him, but Elias couldn't care less. He tells her he's just lightened her load, and she'll understand why in a few days. He tells Clara they're leaving immediately. She has no clue where they're headed, but she follows his lead anyway. Soon they're racing to a new location. Her grandfather explains the situation, calling this disaster a kingdom-wide famine. Clara thinks the old man fell for another scam. He insists it's real. Watching them bicker like this actually makes Elias smile. He's just glad she's happy in this timeline. Elias admits he was the one who warned the Lord. This version of Clara has no idea who he is, so he finally introduces himself properly. She thanks him for the rescue, but Elias isn't worried about those bullies. They likely won't survive the coming storm. Clara is still confused about the danger. Elias explains he only used the word famine so her grandfather wouldn't panic. That gives her a tiny bit of hope until he swaps that word for apocalypse and crushes her spirit instantly. He says the official reports should already be showing signs of total chaos. Trust me, you're going to want to see this. Clara checks her crystal and finds footage of a madness-inducing plague where the infected attack everyone on sight. It's terrifying. The infected look like monsters. Elias realizes his timing was perfect. The end of the world is here. Clara learns that by tomorrow, a toxic smog will officially descend and swallow several provinces. This mist will permanently change every living thing. A massive portion of the kingdom will turn into hollows immediately. After that, they'll hunt down any survivors. Once those victims die, they rise again, making the undead horde even larger. At least Clara knows what ghouls are, but this reality is still too insane for her to fully grasp. Elias knows she'll accept it once the world collapses within the week. For now, they have a smaller problem: traffic. Even the emergency paths are jammed, catching Elias off guard. Clara worries the hollows will reach them while they're trapped. Elias tells her it's fine for now, since the main disaster hasn't fully ignited yet. Still, even before the Great Blight begins, a localized outbreak could easily happen right here. Then a reckless driver forces his carriage between the lanes and slams straight into Elias' vehicle. That instantly sets him off, so he blocks the man from reaching the emergency lane. The driver stops and starts screaming at Elias. Once they see it's just some spoiled rich brat in a gold-trimmed carriage, Lord Alistair says to let it go. Elias refuses. If this fool drags them out, he's a dead man. An hour later, the path finally clears and the drama seems over. But pay attention here, that same driver comes racing back, trying to cut them off. Even Elias is shocked by this guy's ego. The idiot rushes ahead, just to taunt them one last time. Clara's grandfather says it's too dangerous to fight, but Elias is done playing nice. In an apocalypse, the old rules don't exist anymore. He rams the man's carriage, sending it spinning violently into the roadside. The spoiled driver stumbles out and immediately calls the royal guard, trying to get Ilya's throne in a dungeon. He's exactly the kind of person who never lets a grudge go. Next, the group arrives at the fortress Ilya's spent months preparing. Even Lord Alistair is stunned to realize they'll be living in this massive stronghold now. Ilya's warns them that their lives change forever tomorrow, so they should sleep while they can. The next day, Clara finds him relaxing. For once, she actually slept peacefully. Ilya's is eager to show her the massive fortress he's built. As they walk, he explains the reinforced stone walls and the heavy gates that no man can break through. He sets one non-negotiable rule. Absolutely no one enters this fortress without his personal permission. That makes Clara worry about other survivors. Does he really plan to just leave them outside to rot? To answer her, he leads them to a balcony, explaining that disasters reveal the true darkness in people's hearts. Because of that, they must be wary. In this new world, being too kind is a death sentence. He's already built a temporary shelter for survivors outside, but he warns them again, never let them into the main keep. After that, he takes them to the massive vaults and explains how they'll ration their mountain of supplies. Inside the warehouse, he gives them one final look. Using his eye of insight, he reads their true intentions. Seeing pure trust from both of them, Ilya's is satisfied. You and I just saw him find his real allies now. Let the survival begin. Arthur gives the Earl a shotgun, while Sarah receives a powerful heavy crossbow. He issues one main decree: never let these weapons fall into enemy hands. Now, back to the system's mission. You and I are about to see Arthur find his old brother-in-arms, Julian, from the original timeline. The hard part is figuring out where he is. Luckily, the system pinpointed the exact city Julian is in. He leaves Sarah and the Earl in charge of the manor and rides out to find more allies before the end times arrive. The scene shifts to a high-end tavern where a group of young nobles is drinking and singing together. After a few rounds, they head to the corridor. There, Julian accidentally bumps into a lady and offers an apology. Her boyfriend doesn't care and kicks him anyway. Julian hits the stone floor hard while his friend rushes to him. Simon steps up and squares off with the thug who hit Julian, which only makes the brute even angrier. He seizes Simon and starts roughing him up. Julian begs the man to stop and release his friend. A tavern servant watches the chaos unfold. He's already shivering with a fever, and now this brawl breaks out. He quickly jumps in to stop it. The rich punk acts tough and grabs the servant, but he tells the boys to run. Julian and his friend take the chance and bolt. They manage to reach their private room, safe for now. The rest of the group is stunned to see them rush in like they've seen a ghost. Simon explains they bumped into a thug's girl and got thrashed, only escaping thanks to a brave servant. That gets the others fuming. They want to march back out and settle the score for disrespecting their noble house. Julian tries to calm them down, but trust me, things are about to get much worse. That servant is now beaten bloody, and the rich thug has brought backup to go after their whole group. He barks an order for his men to seize the entire group at once. Julian and Simon can't fight back, so they crouch down. Only one man in their circle is brave enough to resist. And the second he tries to speak up, the thug leader smashes a wine bottle over his head. Cedric, yes, that's really his name, is left on the floor with blood pouring from the wound. Meanwhile, Arthur pulls up outside the tavern, knowing Julian has to be inside. Cedric is in bad shape and needs a healer fast. The thug leader looks to his lady for a final word. And she demands they punish the one who touched her, putting Julian right in the crosshairs for a beating. Out of nowhere, Cedric lunges forward for one last desperate strike. If a guard hadn't stopped him, he would have broken the leader's jaw. The leader is shocked a student would dare fight back and smashes a second bottle over Cedric's head. Cedric collapses and his friends panic. Seeing that sends Julian into a blind rage, but the guards quickly pin him down. The last member of their group just stands there, trembling in the corner. The servant is barely conscious while the thugs continue their assault. He tries to swing back but misses. Then, something snaps. Watch closely. The servant's eyes turn blood red, and he throws himself into the fight like a wild animal. The thugs have no clue what just happened, or why the quiet servant suddenly went feral. They try to pin him down, but his strength is unnatural. The servant spins and sinks his teeth into another guard's arm. He's a monster now, completely overpowering the man and slamming him to the stone floor. Then, to everyone's absolute shock, this beast is pinned down easily by a stranger. It's Arthur. He steps in and tells them to knock it off. The thugs are paralyzed. A second ago, the servant was a nightmare, and now this newcomer is holding him down with no effort. The leader demands to know who Arthur is, but he ignores him and asks Julian if he was bitten anywhere. Fortunately, he's clean, even though he has no clue why this stranger is asking such a weird question. Arthur tells him they're leaving right now. They need to go, but the thug leader still blocks their path. Suddenly, one of the guards begins clutching his head in agony after being bitten. Arthur knows exactly what's coming. The infection is spreading fast, and that man is about to turn. He asks if the bite came from that servant. The thug sneers and confirms it, still not realizing the horror that's about to unfold. Arthur realizes the man is already infected, and with a bite that close to his head, he's finished. He tosses the zombie servant into the washroom and slams the door. The creature slams against the wood, but at this stage, these monsters haven't figured out how to open doors yet. Arthur turns back to the thugs. He gets ready to brawl and asks Julian which one he should hit first. It's wild because Julian has no idea who Arthur is. You and I know the truth, but he's totally lost. Trust me, you are going to love watching Silas put this bandit leader in his place. Silas humbles him instantly, grabbing his face and smashing his skull into the floor. The blighted henchman attacks next, but Silas drops him with one heavy fist. The man crumples, and his comrade is terrified. A single blow should not have done that much damage. Then the fallen thug starts twitching in agony. Silas dares the rest of the gang to step up if they need a lesson too. He turns to Julian, ordering him to take his group to the back room and wait by the door. Julian does not argue and helps his wounded friend out. The bandit leader and his crew stop acting tough the second they realize they are completely outmatched. But Silas is not letting them leave. He calls the leader a drunken fool who nearly got his brother killed and decides to return the favor. He throws the thug inside the room and bolts the heavy door from the outside. Now watch this. The door is barred, but the blighted friend has already turned into a ghoul and found his target. A moment later, Silas hears their horrific screams as they are ripped apart, when a servant from the inn rushes over. Silas tells him to bar the door and summon the city watch, claiming there is a victim of the mad plague inside. The worker hesitates until Silas barks at him to move, forcing him to quickly lock the door with a key. After that, Silas leads Julian's group safely out of the tavern. Meanwhile, the staff whisper about the sounds coming from the room, spreading rumors that a plague victim might be trapped within. Terrified, they rush to check the magic scrying orbs, but the moment they see the footage, their faces go ghost white. Everyone in that room has become a flesh-eating monster, tearing each other to pieces, so the staff call the watch immediately. Fortunately, Silas and the others escape the tavern alive. He gets them into the carriage and they speed off fast. Julian is grateful, but he still has no clue who this mysterious warrior actually is. Silas finally introduces himself as a hired blade, but keeps his employer a secret. One of the men doubts the plague, claiming the town criers say it is all fake. Silas reminds them of the horror they just witnessed and asks if that looked fake. Arthur nervously asks if there is any cure. Silas says no, and from here, things are only going to get worse until the entire kingdom falls into ruin. The blighted attacks have already begun. The curse is spreading fast, though for now it is still just a local outbreak. Most of the infected are still waiting to turn. If Julian and his friends want to live, they must follow Silas. They all agree. Right then, Silas receives a quest notification that unlocks new supplies he will definitely need for the journey ahead. The item that really catches his eye is the Wasteland Night Cultivator box. Since all 3 chests look valuable, he decides to open them back at his keep. Still, he knows he needs to win their loyalty. In the original timeline, Julian's friends were slaughtered because of a betrayal, and that rat is still standing right among them. You and I are watching a deadly game of Find the Traitor to see who it is. For now, let's check on Queenie. She is terrified to go to the market after the news and wants her goods delivered to her manor. Suddenly, someone starts thundering on her door, and Queenie begins to panic. She quickly cuts the scrying call with Sterling. When she looks out, she is relieved to see it is just her friend saying a neighbor was dragged away by knights. It seems the neighbor was cursed as well, which explains why the whole manor feels so on edge. Her friend asks about the supplies Sterling promised, but they are still missing. So she comes up with a new plan. Feed Sterling's vanity and tell him Silas has a massive hoard of gold and food. Queenie asks how she knows, and her friend admits she had spies watching him, learning he has been ordering massive amounts of supplies. Queenie cannot believe her ex-lover knew about the end of the world before anyone else. Her friend pushes her to betray Silas so they can steal his stash and live like royalty. Back at the keep, Julian is stunned. He never expected someone to build a real stone citadel. Silas says everyone reacts that way. Sarah and her grandfather are happy he is home. He tells them everything is under control and introduces Julian and the rest of the survivors. He announces they will be staying here, then introduces Sarah and the old man in return. They welcome the newcomers immediately since Silas brought them. Silas asks the grandfather to show them around and explain the house rules. One of the men instantly asks for swords to protect himself. That just makes Silas more suspicious since he knows there is a mole in the group. Arthur tells the man to relax. It is way too early to ask for steel when they have not earned their keep yet. Silas says they can have weapons in a few days. And that is where we leave it. Let us see if they can survive the madness ahead. Gareth is fuming, convinced that if his allies hadn't interfered, those weapons would be theirs right now. Trust me, this guy is delusional, claiming they're prisoners despite Arthur's firm reminder that Lord Alaric saved their lives. Everyone is dying to know who Alaric really is, since a shadow client is clearly pulling the strings. Cedric is still looking for a fight, complaining that Baron Thorne's infection makes him a ticking time bomb. The moron even thinks Alaric is harvesting their organs, so he is pushing the group to strike first. Arthur warns them that if they are wrong, they will be betraying the only man keeping them alive. Cedric does not care about loyalty. He wants power and plans to seize the bastion for his own house. He even suggests murdering young Alara and Master Silas while Alaric is away. Absolutely twisted behavior. Seeing their horrified faces, Cedric quickly laughs it off as a joke, though the tension stays thick. Arthur points out the obvious. If Alaric wanted them dead, they would not be roaming the halls so freely. But Cedric is already plotting his solo move, convinced that cold-blooded ruthlessness is the only way to rule. Later, Alaric meets with Alara and her grandfather, confirming the Baron is stable and the fortress is sealed. Alaric thanks them but warns that their peace is temporary. Tomorrow, the real war begins at their gates. He also tells them to keep a sharp eye on Julian's friends, sensing a traitor in their midst. That night, Alaric visits the ancient vault and summons the mystic store to open a new cultivator crate. He follows up by purchasing the survival rations box and finally the heavy armed deterrence pack. Opening them grants him 50 seeds, a stockpile of food, and 2,500 bolts for his repeating crossbow. This haul is a massive game changer for the upcoming siege, but trouble arrives sooner than anyone expected. That arrogant noble from the road returns with his mercenaries, but the bastion's gates will not even dent. Their commander is losing his mind that a simple gate can withstand such a brutal, heavy assault. Pay attention here, because they've switched to alchemist's fire, tossing firepots over the walls. The flames spread fast as Alara and the others rush to stop it. This only makes Alara trust Alaric's warning even more. Things are spiraling, but our hero refuses to back down. He grabs his heavy repeater to deal with the rats outside, and heads straight for the high watchtower. Master Silas is the first to recognize the attacker as the same entitled brat from the highway. The mercenaries spot them above, and the noble screams for Alaric to surrender or be burned alive. Alaric stays ice cold, giving them 5 minutes to retreat, which only makes the thugs threaten them with more fire. Suddenly, the system issues a new quest. Silas panics, suggesting they only fire a warning shot first. The mission is clear: eliminate the invaders. Alaric knows a warning shot will not stop bloodthirsty criminals like these. These men are monsters who prey on the weak, and Alaric is not about to let them win. He pulls the trigger, and the heavy bolt shreds a man's arm, leaving him screaming in the dirt. Alaric was actually aiming for the skull, but he is still getting used to the kick of this weapon. Even so, seeing their comrade mutilated is enough to send the rest of the cowards into a panic. Knowing they will just return tomorrow, Alaric opens fire and wipes them out, forcing the noble to flee in terror. They try to gallop away in their carriage, but Alaric sprays the entire vehicle with a hail of bolts. You and I can see Silas is stunned. Watching Alaric work makes him wonder who this boy truly is. The carriage is a wreck, and everyone inside is dead. Alaric initially orders a cleanup, then stops himself. Since the Great Scourge is just beginning, he decides to leave the corpses rotting in the sun. Once they rise as the Hollowed, they will be perfect target practice. Meanwhile, Lord Stirling is fast approaching. Lady Seraphina is already losing her patience with Isabella's constant flirting with that greasy, fat merchant. Soon they reach the fortress gates. Isabella suddenly loses her nerve, refusing to take another single step. Seraphina snaps, dragging the girl forward so they can identify which of these buildings belongs to Alaric. The two ladies approach the gate, while Lord Stirling tells his knights to prepare for the signal. Once they are inside, the whole unit moves. Isabella whimpers, asking why she was forced into this mess. Seraphina admits she does not trust her, claiming Isabella's flirting was just a ruse to manipulate poor Alaric. And that's where we leave it. They spot a pile of bodies and realize a total bloodbath happened here. All right, you and I are about to dive into a world where mercy is dead, and survival is the only thing that matters. They wonder if Arthur died in the crossfire, but honestly, as long as the supplies are still there, they do not care. They think about calling Silas in, but Quinn decides they should sneak into the perimeter first to scout the area. The girls approach the main gate, but find it sealed tight. Now, they start wondering if Arthur actually survived the blast. From the tower, Sarah calls down and asks what they want. The two immediately lie and say they are Arthur's close friends. Sarah reports this to Arthur, which makes Quinn even more annoyed. She thinks he has found another girl. Her friend tells her to stay focused because they are dealing with armed men. Quinn still trusts Silas to handle things with his weapons. The real problem is just getting past that massive iron gate. Arthur steps out, wondering why Quinn and Wendy are here. He immediately uses his eye of insight to read their true souls. They act sweet and worried, but he can tell they are hiding malice and do not trust him at all. Arthur laughs at the performance. He reveals he knows Silas and his goons are already hiding nearby, waiting for a chance. The women are stunned. How did he know? Arthur does not play along and fires a warning shot into the air. Quinn and Wendy are shocked he would go this far. Wendy tries to stay calm and tells Quinn not to panic. They are staring down a barrel, but Arthur has no plan to kill them yet. That would be far too easy. Now, watch this carefully. This is where the nightmare truly begins as the dead start rising as mindless zombies. For Arthur, this is perfect. He wants those two to face a much darker end at the hands of the undead. Quinn and Wendy bolt, running from the monsters. They scramble back towards Silas, who has no idea what is coming. Silas sees the zombies charging. The two women break down, begging the man to save them from the rising horde. Silas never expected to run into the infected out here. He instantly changes plans and orders his men to retreat. He does not even try to save the women. Quinn, however, refuses to die in this wasteland. The snake throws her bag at her best friend, causing Wendy to stumble and crash to the ground. Swarmed by zombies, she has no escape. You felt that cold betrayal, right? While Wendy is eaten alive, she curses Quinn, swearing she will die just as horribly one day. Quinn just keeps running, convinced she did what she had to do to survive another day. Arthur watches it all, earning system points for eliminating a threat. Sarah is horrified, but he receives a new mission: to slay the wandering zombies. Sarah cannot believe the infection is strong enough to bring the dead back to life. The apocalypse has truly begun. Arthur warns her that mutations are coming, and death is no longer the end for the infected. Knowing everyone needs to hear this, he calls an emergency meeting for the entire fortress. The group sits down to plan. Arthur tells everyone to stay alert and seal the perimeter of the base completely. Their bodies need time to adjust to the virus. If they adapt well, the risk of sudden mutation finally drops. Even so, Jack is deeply worried about his injured friend. Charles is still in the infirmary as the infection gets worse. Outside, the city is falling into chaos. James tells his family to stay home while he heads to the warehouse for supplies. He warns them not to open the door for anyone. Suddenly, there is a pounding at the door. James grabs a golf club, ready to bash any infected person who tries to enter. When he sees it is only Toby, he finally drops his guard. Huge mistake. Toby brought friends to jump his boss. They kick James to the floor as he yells for them to stop. After years of kindness, Toby still betrays him. Toby snaps back that he was never treated well at all. He says he was humiliated and used. James reminds him he even paid the down payment on Toby's new house. Toby says money means nothing to a rich man. All he wants now are the keys to the massive warehouse. James refuses, so Toby turns his sights on the man's family. He grabs the wife by her hair. Their little boy screams, but Toby just slaps the child hard across the face. James roars in fury. Toby coldly tells him they won't get hurt if he just starts cooperating right now. They force him back to the warehouse. He unlocks it, but Toby is furious to find the shelves are almost empty. James explains that Arthur bought nearly everything recently, even the stock that had already expired. Hearing Arthur's name, Toby gets an idea. If they rob him instead, they will have supplies for years. James knows that is suicide. And that is where we leave it. Trust me, you are going to want to see what happens next. It gets wild. He even suspects Alaric knew about the Great Scourge before it started and prepared his fortress in advance. Baron Thorn refuses to risk his own skin, forcing his old captain to handle it. Sir Julian is lost until Thorn threatens his family. If he cannot secure Alaric's supplies, his wife and son will suffer for it. For him, it is a hopeless, dark nightmare. All right, you and I are about to see just how grim things get inside the walls of Blackwood Keep. The group watches in despair as Silas is reduced to a beast. Cedric says they should end his life, making Alaric instantly suspicious again. Arthur cannot believe Cedric would say something so heartless, but Cedric is being completely serious. He argues there is no point keeping a blighted husk alive. If he breaks his chains, every soul in this keep will be in danger. It's a bitter pill to swallow, but he's right. Alaric agrees. There is no cure, so their friend is already long gone. To test Cedric's resolve, Alaric hands him a dagger to see his next move. Cedric freezes at first, then realizes the weight of it. Alaric wants him to be the one to execute Silas. Cedric trembles as his eyes lock onto the cold, sharpened steel. Alaric pushes him, reminding him he was the one demanding a weapon. If death is mercy, he should be the one to send his friend off. Before the blade falls, Arthur knocks it away. He knows the weight of that choice and offers to take the sin upon himself. Alaric warns him quickly that if he does this, he'll be carrying the weight of a life on his soul forever. That is not something to take lightly, but Arthur trusts Alaric and stands firm. Seeing his resolve, Alaric lets him step forward. Now watch closely, because right as the blade is about to fall, Alaric suddenly reaches out and stops him. Even after agreeing to the deed, he changes his mind. Silas's case is unique, so Alaric doesn't want him killed just yet. He still has a use for the beast. His mysterious gift had already warned him that Silas's mutation is incredibly rare. Once he's alone in the room, Alaric checks the chains. Right now, Silas is nothing but a starving, savage monster. But Alaric walks up to the beast without fear, whispering that he still has one last job. The next day, a carriage slams into a post. It is Sir Julian, having such a bad day that he cannot even steer his carriage straight. Luckily, he is close enough to the fortress to go on foot, but things get worse when a hollow suddenly lunges and bites him. He kicks the creature off, dives back to the wreckage, and grabs an iron pipe to crack the monster in the skull. He keeps smashing until the head is a mangled, bloody mess. But he wasted too much time, and now more hollows are closing in. I know what you're thinking, but he keeps moving. Meanwhile, Alaric has his soldiers geared up for an all-out war. They are all armed and ready to purge the blighted near the fortress gates. Lady Alara struggles with the heavy protective leather. It is restrictive, but necessary. Alaric explains that these monsters can strike with explosive force, making them lethal to anyone without battle experience. They can shed the gear later. Once outside, they pick out a lone, wandering hollow as their very first target. Alaric signals everyone to prepare. They are within striking distance. Suddenly, the monster spots them and charges with a horrific scream. As it rushes in, Alaric barks orders to cover one another and keep a safe distance from the creature's reach. He effortlessly dances past the monster's claws, showing them exactly how to find an opening. The best places to hit are the temples or the neck. The spine is the weak point. Surprisingly, Pip is brave enough to swing at the monster's face, but instead of a real hit, he just hurts himself. Alaric shouts that bashing against the thick skull is a complete waste of energy. It is one of the worst mistakes a soldier can make. That blunder gives the monster an opening, forcing Pip to block with his blade. The beast keeps pressing him while he shakes and cries out for help. Still, Alaric is impressed he managed to defend himself at all. Then, Arthur charges in from the side and aims a heavy blow straight for the monster's throat. He hits the weak spot perfectly, allowing the others to swarm in and finish the kill. Alaric reminds them that repeated strikes ensure victory. Arthur turns and asks how they performed, but Alaric says their own survival should be the only answer they need. Then another hollow lunges from a blind spot. Arthur screams a warning. The monster is inches from his shoulder when Alaric spins and catches it. Without a shred of fear, he turns the ambush into another lesson. Always be aware of your surroundings, no matter what. The team is stunned by his godlike speed. Now, let's see how the captain is doing. Sir Julian is regretting every life choice when he spots several carriages outside the keep. He hopes someone else already killed Alaric. Then he catches the sound of voices nearby. He recognizes Alaric's tone and creeps closer to get a better look at the scene. Hiding behind a ruined cart, he watches in disbelief. Alaric and his crew are dismantling the blighted with terrifying ease. What he misses is the twisted corpse of Lady Mary crawling from beneath the cart to grab his ankle. She yanks him down hard. Julian braces for death as the beast lunges, but just before he's killed, her head explodes. Trust me, we're just getting started. Silas arrives just in time to save the man. Lord Barrett pushes a corpse aside while Silas asks what he is doing here. All right, stick with me because Silas just spotted a nasty bite on Lord Barrett's arm. Silas levels his flintlock at him, saying it is over. The Lord begs for one last word before Silas pulls the trigger. Silas agrees to listen, but stays back. Even Barrett knows there is no hope for his soul now. It is only a matter of time before he turns, but he wants his family spared from this nightmare. He explains that Baron Thorn attacked them and is holding them hostage to seize Silas's royal supplies. Barrett has done dark deeds before, but nothing as vile as Thorn's current plan. His family is innocent, and Thorn will show no mercy, so he begs Silas to be their savior. Silas is torn. He knows Barrett was selfish, but the man did deliver the goods as promised. Besides, his group needs more women to keep the settlement balanced, so saving them makes sense. He is even more convinced when the system offers 25 points to protect the Lord's family. He still has to purge the undead near the citadel. Silas agrees to keep the family safe. Now pay attention, because Lord Barrett just collapsed in relief. He knows his time has finally run out. The Lord refuses to die like a coward. Silas understands and tells Sarah to bring a swift steed from the vault. She is confused, but obeys. Then Silas tells the Lord to ride far away and isolate himself in a place where no living soul can find him. He does not say much, but explains it is the only way before the corruption takes his mind. Barrett accepts and gives thanks. In the next moment, the Lord rides off into the dark. He is fading fast, thinking only of his family. Behind him, Silas looks over the pile of dead monsters. He douses the bodies in oil and burns them to ash. Their training session is officially finished. Silas is certain the team can handle scattered monsters if they work as one. However, at their current level, a full horde would still crush them. That will take time. Silas leads the team toward another hidden storage room. Our hero has the old man guard the armory tonight, while he prepares to enter the ruined city. Sarah's grandfather is terrified. Arthur and the others offer to help, but Silas refuses. The mission is far too deadly for their skills. They must stay and guard the citadel walls. Soon after, he is in his armored carriage, fully geared. For once, the merchant's vault is empty. Even the refresh takes time. This time, he spends points to reset the entire list. New crates appear that he has never seen. Ancient tech, life-saving gear, and high-threat boxes. Each manual reset doubles the cost. Even so, Silas decides these new crates are worth his points. For now, he only buys the ancient tech box, leaving himself with just 6 points. He opens it and finds a strength elixir that grants 5 points. That is a massive power spike. Okay, you and I know Silas is already strong, but this potion, it pushes him into superhuman territory. His real goal is Barrett's estate. Inside, the wife and child tremble, praying for the Lord's return. Suddenly, Baron Thorn and his thugs burst in. The helpless woman asks what they want with them. One scoundrel reaches for her, saying they will have their fun while her husband is away. She fights back, begging for mercy. The thugs tear at her dress while her brave son tries to help. Then the night Sir Leo walks in and asks what all the noise is about. A goon invites Leo to join the fun, but Leo shuts it down. The mission comes first. The thug grumbles, asking why it matters. Leo reminds him that this is Lord Barrett's family. If she breaks or takes her own life, Lord Barrett will have nothing left to lose, and he will come for every single one of us. Leo says they can deal with her once the husband is handled. The thug finally backs off. The men leave, though one gives a final creepy warning. The mother and son can only sob. Night falls and the undead begin to roam. Driving through the ruins, Silas reflects on his growth. With 13 points in stamina, he is twice as strong as a normal man, with perfect reflexes. He speeds through blocked paths, drifting around corners and feeling the rush of power. But the streets are packed with monsters, so he leaves the carriage. The center is close, and driving further would just draw a horde. As he moves on foot, 2 monsters charge him. Silas doesn't panic, and trust me, neither should we. All right, you and I are about to see Arthur dodge an attack and hurl these rotters into each other. Then he summons his blade and lunges back in, holding nothing back. One clean sweep, and both rotters lose their heads. To him, they are just practice targets now. He is actually stunned by how easily he can tear them apart. He is clearly over twice as strong as any normal man now. His senses are sharper, too. He can hear his goal clearly from 800 meters away. Nearby, a pack of ghouls keeps throwing themselves against the heavy doors of an old village marketplace. Inside, a few survivors pile up heavy crates against the entrance, praying to the gods that the wood holds. While searching for an exit, a terrified young boy asks his father if this is where they finally die. The man tries to soothe him, saying the monsters cannot enter, but if they do, they will rejoin his mother. That only makes the boy cry harder. Captain Sterling gets annoyed by such a foolish thing to tell the boy. But the father snaps back that if the captain were so clever, they would be safe in a manor by now. Even Sterling starts to fear the end. Then, flintlock blasts ring out. One ghoul at the door has its skull shattered. Young Leo falls back in shock while his father stares, totally confused. The captain tells them to move the barricade and check outside, but warns everyone to stay completely silent. When they peek out, they see the nearby rotters are already slain, so they cautiously step into the street. Young Leo suddenly screams about a mutated beast. His father is confused, but the boy explains it is a faster monster, just like in the old legends. Now pay attention here. Alistair actually starts lecturing his son for thinking about fairy tales during a struggle. He claims that is why the boy failed his lessons. Captain Sterling cuts in, telling them to stop their bickering. Grades mean nothing now. He tells them to move fast and watch their backs as they head for the fortress. At a crossroads, they freeze. Alistair looks across the way and spots a lone young man standing in the shadows. It is Arthur, busy using his mysterious system to boost his physical stats and sharpen his abilities. The boy screams that it is a mutated ghoul, but the captain quickly sees this is a human survivor. Arthur notices them, laughs at the kid's wild imagination, and tells him to stop seeing monsters everywhere. The captain relaxes, realizing it is just another soul lost in the chaos. He walks over, saying it is too dangerous to travel alone. They need to stay together, so he invites Arthur to join. Arthur asks who they are and why so few survived. While scanning the area, the captain explains they are foraging and that many civilians are hiding at the King's Plaza. Hearing that, Arthur remembers Ravenwood Manor is just a short distance away. Alistair nods, confirming it is right across the way. He urges Arthur to join them, insisting on safety in numbers. Captain Sterling has a flintlock, and they know how to fight ghouls. They have no idea who Arthur really is, and he does not brag. He simply agrees. They move on carefully. Alistair asks why Arthur wants to reach Ravenwood Manor and if he is seeking someone. Arthur says yes. Alistair asks if it is a family member or perhaps a lady friend. And I know what you are thinking. That is a dark warning for Arthur to hear, and the captain here grimly agrees. Even if they survived the ghouls, they likely would have run into those savage beasts. That gets Arthur's attention, and he asks for details. Sterling says a gang of outlaws is hiding in the Blackwood Ridge. To survive, they hunt other people, and his group has already lost many good men to them. He stops talking and reminds everyone to be wary of other survivors. Suddenly, the boy screams for the captain to watch out. Captain Sterling spins around and sees a ghoul lunging. He quickly puts it down with a few precise shots. After the close call, the captain gasps for air, terrified, but the noise of the fight has already summoned a horde. The captain starts to panic, then spots an abandoned armored carriage. Everyone bolts for it. Arthur just smiles at their choice. Running blindly would lure even more monsters, but a carriage makes a decent fort. Still, the problem is obvious. If the perimeter fails, there is no escape. He gives their little survival plan a score of 70%. The others scramble into the carriage, and the captain yells for Arthur to hurry. He leaps inside and Sterling slams the door. He warns them to check the shadows for hidden ghouls, but the boy shouts that the horde is closing in. Captain Sterling grits his teeth, realizing they moved fast, but simply not fast enough to escape the swarm. The monsters begin slamming against the carriage, trying to break in. More arrive every second as the captain struggles with the door. Then Arthur reaches out and slams the door shut with such force that the ghouls are blasted back, and the seal holds tight. Trust me, even Sterling is stunned by that legendary strength. Stick with me, we're about to see Jack hold the line while Captain Leo puts his total faith in him. Jack blocks the door, shouting for the team to break the windows and fight from there. They immediately shatter the coach windows. Arthur takes point, smashing every undead head that tries to climb inside while the rest of the crew holds his legs. They make sure he doesn't tumble out into the hungry crowd below. Captain Leo keeps his sword sheathed and his crossbow ready. He's low on bolts and needs to save every shot for a real crisis. Suddenly, Jack pulls out a heavy crossbow and hands it to the captain. Leo is stunned, asking where he found it, but Jack just shrugs and says he scavenged it earlier. With the new weapon in hand, Arthur and Leo join forces. They use raw power and steel to clear out the rotting monsters. After a brutal struggle, the path is clear. They finally step out of the cursed carriage. One arrogant brat starts bragging, convinced they're destined for greatness in this new world. Jack snaps at them to stay focused. One mistake is all it takes to end up as lunch. Now pay attention, because back at the Citadel, things are taking a dark turn. Silas volunteers for the night watch while everyone prays for Jack's safe return. The scholar asks why he's suddenly so helpful. Silas snaps back, telling him to shut his mouth. He claims he's always been the most dedicated soldier in the entire house. The big guy gets silenced instantly. He wonders why Silas is so worked up over a simple bit of banter. Lord Alistair steps in, telling the group that if Silas is on watch, the rest of them should sleep. He orders Silas to raise the alarm if anything moves. As the moon rises, Silas sits alone, waiting for the heavy breathing of sleep to fill the halls of the fortress. It's time. He needs to finish his dark plan before Jack ever makes it back to the gate. Meanwhile, the old steward is out cold. The key to the royal armory is sitting right beside his pillow. He doesn't hear Silas creeping into the bedchamber like a ghost. But just as Silas reaches for the cold iron key, the old man's eyes snap open. He's caught red-handed in the middle of the night. The steward demands to know what Silas is doing there. Silas answers with a heavy fist to the face. He grabs the key and sprints away while the steward cries out for him to bring it back. The shouting wakes the whole house. The old man gasps out the news. Silas has stolen the armory key. They scramble after the traitor, but the bastard starts throwing heavy crates and junk behind him to block the narrow hallway. Let's pause for a second because this part is actually hilarious. The whole group just stops there. They could easily jump the trash, but they're frozen like characters in a glitchy game. Silas spots the healing wing on his way and decides to burn every bridge he's got left. He enters the room where Cedric, who's already turned into a monster, is strapped down. Suddenly, the creature lashes out with a free, rotting hand. Silas jumps back in shock. One hand was supposed to be bound tightly. He wonders if the leather straps were just too loose. That actually makes him smile. Now he doesn't have to risk his own skin untying the beast. Meanwhile, the others finally clear the debris, but the sight waiting for them in the corridor is pure nightmare fuel. They can't believe Silas would go so far as to unleash a monster. The old man regrets ever trusting that snake, but Sira tells him that regret won't save them now. Since the weapons are locked tight, they have to force the creature back into its cell using nothing but grit. Lord Alistair remembers the tactics Jack taught them. Stay calm, stay distanced, and whatever you do, don't get bitten. Stealing their nerves, they move in. Julian grabs the beast by the throat while the others pin down its flailing arms. The steward helps the most, shouting for them to drag the thrashing monster back toward the heavy iron doors. On the count of 3, they shove the creature inside and slam the locks shut with everything they've got left. Someone gasps that handling the zombie was easier than they thought. The others nod in relief, but the danger isn't over. The old man warns them they've wasted too much time. That traitor Silas has definitely reached the weapons by now. Right on cue, Silas appears, mocking the old man's insults. Even worse, he's holding a loaded flintlock. He's annoyed the vault only had one gun, but he says one bullet is enough to start the slaughter. He'll hunt for the rest later. Silas aims the barrel and orders them to get back into the room. Julian tries to reason with him, reminding him that Jack saved their lives and gave them a real fighting chance. But Silas sneers, saying Jack always acts like he's better than everyone. Saving them once doesn't mean they're his slaves for life. The old man calls him a spineless coward. Inside the healing wing, Cedric seems to have a mind of his own, and he's ready to join the chaos. Before the blood spills, we shift back to the road where Captain Leo is laying out the map to Obsidian Manor. He warns that the manor grounds are a maze. the perfect spot for ghouls to hide. He tells Jack to watch his back out there. Once he finds his family, he needs to return to Rosewood Gardens. The side gate is much safer than trying the main drawbridge. Jack thanks him and promises he won't forget the advice. As Jack prepares to leave, Arthur offers to go along as a bodyguard. But Captain Leo stops him, saying they have no idea what nightmares are prowling inside Obsidian Manor. One wrong move means certain death. You and I have to ask, can Jack survive this alone? All right, let's see if Silas survives Alistair's trial. You and I know Julian is capable, but can Silas make it out alive? Meanwhile, the courtyard outside is absolutely swarming with ghouls. Inside, the mercenaries holding Silas's family are losing patience since he hasn't returned. One rogue doesn't care and says he's waited long enough. Tonight, he's taking his rage out on the wife. These idiots are still waiting for a dead man. One of them guesses Silas might already be dead. Another says once they've had their fun, they'll tie the woman up so she can't end her life. Since they don't know how much time they have, they decide to start their cruel games now. The woman trembles at their plan. The mercenary captain finally gives the go-ahead, but warns them not to damage the woman while they're playing around. Then the captain notices something very strange outside. All the ghouls out there have suddenly dropped dead. He doesn't know why, but we do. He goes out to check, thinking it's a rescue team. Watch closely. This is where his luck finally runs out. A blade flashes from the shadows, taking his head clean off before he can scream. Back inside, the remaining thugs are ready for their prize. Grinning, they begin unbuckling their gear. They rip her son away, striking her hard across the face when she tries to scream. They toss the boy aside, but the child fights back with everything he has. The rogues kick him out and slam the door shut. Right then, the captain's headless body drops in front of him, and the boy freezes in total shock. Then he sees a figure in the doorway. There's nothing to fear. It's Julian. Julian asks if Silas is his father. The boy stammers out an answer. Inside, the rogues are already tearing at the woman's gown while she struggles to cover her skin. One smug bastard strikes her again, telling her to scream while they continue their assault. But she stays silent so her son won't hear. The rogue decides he'll go first, then let the others have their turn. Suddenly, the door explodes inward. One rogue thinks the boy did it, but before he can even blink, his head is sliced off. His friend asks why he's just standing there and tells him to kick the brat out, not realizing the man is already a corpse. A second later, the body collapses and the others are left stunned. They still can't figure out what's happening when Julian grabs one of them and slams him violently against the stone wall. The rogue, still fumbling with his gear, stammers and asks who Julian is. He gets no answer. He kicks the man's face in, ending him. Back at the fort, pay attention, Alistair is ready to spill blood for control. Move or he fires. The old man tells the others to obey and head into the back room. Alara refuses, but he insists they'll find a way out later. Alistair only grins, saying there's no way out for them. He warns them they haven't seen his true ruthlessness yet, then decides to execute the old man for talking too much. The two people behind the elder try to calm him down, but suddenly they hear a sound. The cell door lock starts turning and the heavy door swings open. To everyone's shock, Cedric somehow used the key to escape. No one can believe he unlocked it himself while in that berserk state, but one thing is terrifyingly clear. Cedric is staring straight at Alistair with pure killing intent. Alistair quickly levels his flintlock to kill the monster before it reaches him. He pulls the trigger, but the weapon jams, and he instantly knows his time is up. Before he can react, the beast leaps and rips him apart, ending the man who'd kept the kingdom terrified. Cedric doesn't stop. He drags Alistair's mangled corpse back toward the cell. No one understands what's happening. They just stare in frozen silence. Then Cedric finds the iron key, tosses it away, and locks himself back inside, leaving everyone standing there in total shock. Meanwhile, Julian finishes off the remaining thugs and unties the mother. Then he calls the young boy over. The mother pulls her son close, asking what Julian wants with him. Julian doesn't explain. He just tells the boy to step forward. After a moment, the child decides to trust him and tells his mother everything will be okay. When he walks over, Julian hands him a dagger and tells him to kill the men who hurt them. The rogues instantly begin begging. The mother objects, saying he's just a child, but Julian says he isn't just a child anymore. From now on, he must protect his mother, so he needs to find his courage and kill the monsters who harmed her. The memory of their filthy smiles flashes through the boy's mind. With all his fear turning into pure rage, he rushes them and finally takes his revenge. His mother watches in horror as her son is consumed. Because even now, his father isn't coming home. Broken and desperate, he asks Julian if his father is truly dead. Julian simply nods, and that's where we leave them, a heavy price paid for dark justice, right? Stick with me, you are about to see Silas's loyalty tested. He clings to Lady Alara as she begs Julian to save him, but the boy refuses. He wants to stay and protect her. Julian tells both of them to come with him. He says he promised Lord Cedric he would keep them safe. Hearing that, the mother and son follow him. As they pass the corpses, Silas trembles at the sight of the monster who killed them. Julian calmly says he was the one who did it. The boy is Silas, and his mother is Lady Alara. Then suddenly, Julian signals them to stop after hearing something suspicious nearby. He asks Alara where Tower 8 in the Silver Estate is. She says it is straight ahead and wonders why he wants to know. The story shifts to Tower 8 where a group of bandits is outside demanding supplies. Inside, the survivors hide in the rooms, arguing over whether they should give in. Captain Alistair shuts that down right away. He says the looters are beasts who will break their word and kill everyone except the women. Outside, the gang gives them 10 minutes to cooperate. One woman inside considers begging for mercy, but another refuses to become those men's plaything. Then, the brute gorilla cuts in and tells them not to worry. They are not surrendering, and if they guard the hallway, the bandits won't get through. Outside, the gang leader feels smug about their weapons. But his lackey points out they are still not strong enough to force their way inside. Especially with the armed leader inside and everyone hiding. The boss says they do not need to rush in. Instead, he orders his men to cut the water to the lower rooms and wait. While they plan, Julian watches from nearby. Silas quietly asks if these are villains, and Julian says yes. Funny enough, the same kid asking that just killed 3 grown men, yet he still sounds innocent. Julian reminds Silas these are the same kind of villains who hurt his mother and must be stopped. Meanwhile, Captain Alistair tells everyone to watch the stairs and stay hidden while he checks what the men downstairs are doing. He moves to the window and peeks outside, spotting 7 men total. 3 with crossbows. Then a loud shot rings out, catching Alistair by surprise. Everyone else is confused, too. Now watch this. You and I know Julian opened fire on the gang. 1 man drops and the rest are totally clueless. That is when Alistair sees Julian advancing with a heavy bow in hand. He starts firing, and another thug takes a clean headshot. Once they notice him standing among them, they fire back with hand crossbows. But Julian keeps walking like nothing is happening. None of the bolts even touch him. Seeing how pathetic they are only makes him smirk. He aims at the boss, hiding behind a stone pillar, but the bolts hit the stone instead. Annoyed, the boss yells at his men to keep firing while Julian is focused on him. 1 lackey stands up, ready to kill Julian himself. Julian shifts his aim and blows the man's head off. Behind the stone, the leader sneers, thinking Julian is out of bolts. He raises his weapon at Julian, but Julian just stares back coldly. The second the thug fires, Julian tilts his head and dodges the shot. He grabs the man's arm, twists it, and points the weapon under his neck. He pulls the trigger and sends a bolt through the bandit's head. Just like that, the squad is gone. Let's pause here. Julian just cleared a whole squad like it was nothing. Now he heads inside to finish the job. The remaining thugs rush him in desperation, but Julian does not even blink. He stays where he is, and 3 quick shots drop all of them. Silas watches in awe, even more impressed by Julian after seeing that fight. Suddenly, a magical quest appears for Julian to recruit survivors from the estate for a great reward. Julian asks who those people are, and Alistair says they are from the Iron Keep south of the capital. He then calls over two young men in yellow tunics, Lucian and Cedric, and asks them to explain the Iron Keep to Julian since they came from the south. They say the place is controlled by a gang with steel and lots of food, and they have gathered almost all the survivors from the south. That makes Julian pause. He wonders if the Iron Keep is where Lord Leo and Sir Quinn built their settlements in his past life. Maybe they took over there. Then he asks if that is now the only settlement left in the south. One of the men says it was not always like that, but the gang had weapons and weaker shelters could not fight back. Every time they took a place, they killed half the people and took the young noblewomen along with anyone willing to join them. At that point, Julian is sure who is behind it. Alistair hears his confidence and asks what he means. Julian says the three men they just killed all had hand crossbows. He tells them to keep those weapons and check for spare bolts, because there are probably more of them out there. He gives Alistair his bow and 5 quivers. We know what happens next. All right, you and I are diving into Arthur's war against the Blackwood Syndicate. He hands over the weapons, telling them to hold out while he regroups at the manor. Then he will return to finish that crew once and for all. One soldier is stunned, asking if Arthur actually plans to wage war against the entire Blackwood Syndicate. He warns that they have dozens of fighters, maybe hundreds. Sir Liam tries to talk him out of it, suggesting they flee, but Arthur tells him not to worry. He already has a bloody score to settle with the Blackwood leaders. He also promises to return with a larger transport to move everyone east toward the Ironhold Fortress, where he's building a stronghold and needs more loyal hands. With that, Arthur gives a quick nod, tells them to stay sharp, and rides off with Sarah and Silas. The scene shifts to a much darker place, where bodies are piled high and a lone sentinel stands watch. This is the Blackwood estate. Inside the mansion, the high lords of the syndicate are gathered for a meeting. When Lord Guy, the orange-haired boss, asks why the vital supplies at the Royal Plaza still haven't been secured, Baron Silas says he already dispatched a squad there, so they should have returned. He has no idea his men were already slaughtered. Kai reminds him that many powerful nobles live near Royal Heights, so seizing those resources will be anything but simple. Silas claims his knights were strictly ordered to bring back anyone left alive. Now watch this, the boss is absolutely furious, blasting Silas for failing every single mission. Silas quickly promises to get it right while Kai enjoys the show. Stepping outside later, one of the lackeys notices his dark mood and asks what went wrong. Silas asks if the 7 men he sent out have returned yet. The lackey reports the whole squad was found dead an hour ago. Silas is shocked, unable to believe common survivors from Rose Garden killed his armed men. Panicking, he orders Thomas to gather every soldier who knows how to handle a weapon. He cannot afford to fail again. Meanwhile, Arthur finally makes it back to his hidden base. The moment Sophie hears the engine, she knows Brother Arthur is home. As he enters the fortress, a glowing mission window confirms his success. Sophie happily welcomes him back, but Arthur immediately notices that Luke is missing from the group. This confirms his suspicion that the man was a traitor. Everyone is stunned to learn Arthur had been tracking Luke's treachery from the very start. He gestures to Sarah and Silas, telling the others to take them to their quarters before meeting him in the infirmary. Once they are alone, Arthur explains he knew from day one that Luke had nothing but bad intentions. He admits he wasn't entirely sure, but he knew one of Jack's friends was absolute trash. Then, Arthur tosses a massive gun to Jack. When Jack catches it and checks the magazine, he realizes the rounds are only rubber. The old man immediately asks about Chris in the infirmary. Walking over, Arthur says Chris is no ordinary zombie. He is a rare mutant, something Arthur had already confirmed. He once ordered the zombie to blink 3 times, and Chris actually obeyed. Arthur explains that after the collapse, Those infected by otherworldly sources have a tiny chance of becoming these rare, sentient mutants. They are far more intelligent than normal ghouls, possessing massive potential and even fragments of their old human memories. You and I can see that Chris is rare even among mutants. Inside, they find him standing over the captured traitor. Seeing Arthur, the zombie actually waves. Arthur tells him to stop holding back and get rid of the pathetic bastard. As the mutant begins dragging the snake away, Jack asks if his old friend still remembers his face. Chris slows down, then turns to look at Jack. No one knows what he's thinking until he suddenly swings a fist at his old pal. Turns out Chris is just messing with his buddy, proving that even as a monster, he still loves a good prank. Later, Arthur reviews his glowing system screen. Jack just unlocked a hidden achievement called Soul Bond, adding points to Arthur's total. Surprised by the massive bonus, Arthur decides to check the dimensional shop for any new gear. He spots a level 2 item called the high-tech supply box, but it costs 50 points, making him hesitate. Instead, he opens the 2 boxes he has left. Both of them grant him some truly legendary rewards. The Lifesaver box gives him an interdimensional infection blocker, which stops new infections from taking hold, though it cannot reverse mutations. The armed box grants him a Barrett M82 sniper rifle. Arthur is totally blown away by his luck. The Barrett is a legendary pull from a low-level box, and that blocker could save someone from a grisly fate. These rewards make him crave that level 2 box, but he stays focused on tomorrow's mission to recruit the Rose Garden survivors. Outside, Chris tosses the snake far beyond the fort's walls. Traitors have no home here. By morning, everyone gathers for training. Trust me, you and I are going to want to see what Arthur announces next. All right, you and I are about to see what happens when survival training turns into a total bloodbath. The targets are hit with lethal precision. Arthur tells Master Silas to have the men clear more space, because he is bringing back the survivors from Raven Reach today. Silas agrees immediately. He orders the Ironheart to join the ride, knowing his monstrous strength is essential. Soon, they stumble onto a rusted bus crawling with the undead. Saren clears them with ease, while the Ironheart starts tossing the rotting corpses off the deck. Once it is clear, Arthur hands over the keys, telling his monstrous ally he can breathe for now. But once they reach the city, the mask goes back on to avoid scaring the civilians. The beast just growls in response. Meanwhile, at Iron Peak, Lord Valerius gathers his squad of thugs to prepare for the assault. This time he is leading from the front, obsessed with burning Rosewood Manor to the ground. With his army and superior weapons, he refuses to believe he can fail. Their truck roars toward the estate. After seizing the zombie bus, Arthur jumps into the driver's seat and pushes the engine to the limit. Now watch this. When the undead block the path, Arthur does not tap the brakes, he plows straight through them. Using his sharpened reflexes, he drifts and weaves through the graveyard of cars on the highway. Back in Raven Reach, things look quiet, but inside, Captain Miller and the survivors are rationing their last scraps of food. Their grim dinner is interrupted by the low rumble of an engine. A kid hopes it is Arthur coming to the rescue, but Miller is not taking chances. He grabs his AK-47 and orders everyone to stay silent while he investigates. He peers out the window cautiously. What he sees is definitely not a rescue. It is a pack of House Blackwood thugs seeking revenge, scouting out Building 8. Once the target is confirmed, Valerius signals his men to move in for the kill. Miller grits his teeth. Just when things looked hopeful, these Iron Peak bastards had to show up. Elder Thomas raises his stolen handgun, ready for a fight. With weapons in their hands, the survivors feel a surge of bravery. Captain Miller warns them not to be fools. The enemy has the numbers and the firepower, so they have to stick to the plan. As he heads to the rooftop, he begins setting the trap. Outside, the Blackwood men wait until they are in range to break the survivors. Led by Valerius, they raise their weapons and aim directly at the windows of the tower. Thomas sees the barrels level and screams for everyone to hit the floor and find cover. The silence is shattered by a hail of gunfire shredding the high-rise. Glass explodes everywhere, forcing Thomas to crawl back as the walls are peppered with lead. You and I both know what is coming next. Valerius takes a megaphone, ordering his men to keep firing at any window where a shadow moves. Then he starts taunting the survivors, screaming through the microphone at the building. But before he can finish, the man standing right next to him takes a bullet to the skull. The gang freezes in terror. They never expected a hidden sniper to actually have the guts to fire back. From the rooftop, Captain Miller's rifle keeps barking as the thugs scramble. He has the high ground and a perfect line of sight. The Iron Peak invaders never realized these civilians had an automatic weapon. Valerius curses the terrible intelligence. He was told they only had a single pistol, and even with the gear taken from his dead scouts, there should have only been 4 weak weapons. His shaken men look to him for orders, terrified of being picked off. His answer is simple: retreat. But his men panic in the worst way, bolting out one at a time instead of moving together under cover. Running into the open against a crack shot is suicide, and the captain on the roof makes every bullet count. Valerius screams at his idiots for dying so easily, then begins a desperate countdown. At the count of 3, the remnants of his squad run for their lives. While his men flee in total chaos, the boss stays hidden, watching the rooftop carefully. The shooter adjusts his aim, dropping the fleeing thugs one by one with cold, calculated precision. The boss's plan was sick from the start: use his own men as human bait until the sniper ran dry. Total coward move. Just as he hoped, the rifle clicks empty, and that brief reload is all Valerius needs to reach the car. Out of the entire strike force, only 4 are left. The last man is seconds too late. Valerius is already in the driver's seat, and he is not waiting for anyone. The poor bastard takes a bullet to the brain and drops dead. The 2 who manage to dive into the truck stay low, terrified they are next. Back on the main road, Arthur continues barreling through the highway wreckage in his stolen bus. He stays calm, eyes on the road, focused solely on reaching his people. And that is where we leave it. Another car racing past in the opposite direction catches him off guard, but Arthur stays on his mission. Wild, right? All right, you and I are diving back into a world where points mean survival and monsters are on our side. Victor and Arthur stepped off the steel carriage to witness the absolute carnage left behind from the battle. Arthur hoped his abandoned repeater rifle helped, guessing the tracks belonged to the fleeing Blackwood bandits who escaped. Victor stared at the fresh, bloodied bodies on the ground and began growling with hunger. Arthur grinned and told him to go ahead and feast. It was better that Victor got the corpses than the rotting ghouls lurking nearby in the shadows. Victor lit up like a kid in a candy shop. Arthur let him loose as long as he returned to Sector 8 once finished. The monster did not waste a second, sinking his teeth directly into a fallen bandit's throat. He gorged on the flesh, and as he swallowed, a wave of dark energy surged through his entire body. Meanwhile, Arthur surveyed the scene, admiring how ruthless Commander Leo could be when protecting his people from raiders. A young boy peeked through a shattered window and cheered the moment he saw Arthur standing there. Once they realized it was really him, the other survivors finally showed themselves and waved him over. Led by the Knight Commander, the survivors gathered their gear. Leo thanked Arthur for the weapon that saved them. He had been a master marksman once. Now pay attention here, this is where the survivors get the shock of their lives. Everyone froze when they saw what was coming. It was Victor, limping toward them with a heavy, strained look. Leo reacted instantly, grabbing his alchemical rifle and aiming it straight at the undead beast's head. Arthur calmly lowered the weapon, telling everyone to relax. Believe it or not, this monster was with them. Honestly, who could blame their fear? Arthur pointed Victor toward the remaining corpses and told him to keep eating. The commander was stunned. He asked if Arthur could actually communicate and lead the walking dead. Arthur explained Victor was different, then told everyone to board the carriage so he could explain on the way. As they headed over, Arthur reminded Victor to finish his meal quickly and return to the group. Victor gave a clumsy OK sign, without even pausing for a second during his gruesome feast. After devouring every last Blackwood Mountain thug, Victor picked up his iron mask and strapped it back on. The child was baffled, wondering how a ghoul could be smart enough to put a mask on itself. Arthur warned him to stay respectful. Secretly, the kid started thinking the mutant zombie was actually kind of cool. After his solo feast, Victor climbed into the steel carriage just like a regular passenger would. Having consumed so many people, he was significantly heavier. The entire carriage actually tilted when he stepped inside. This time, Victor even managed to slur out a word while handing the mask key back to Arthur. I know what you're thinking. A talking zombie. Yeah, things just got a whole lot more complicated for our heroes. Still, Arthur's main focus was getting everyone home safely and turning his fortress into an unstoppable stronghold. He took the driver's seat, told everyone to hold on, and sped away from the ruins. Back at Blackwood Peaks, Lord Julian reported the failed raid and got absolutely destroyed for his total incompetence. Baron Malphaz did not believe the excuse about automatic weapons. To him, it sounded like a pathetic lie. Julian insisted it was true, begging them to go check the battlefield themselves if they doubted his word. The Baron's right-hand man finally lost his temper and kicked the failure to the floor. That was Julian's signal to leave. The enforcer had been sick of his stupidity for a long time. Now that he had lost so many men, just killing him outright was starting to sound much easier. Another leader, Lord Thorn, called out the real reason for the hate. The guy wanted Julian's wife. The creep even suggested sharing her like property. Malphaz smiled, but said they should wait for the right moment. What the thugs did not realize was that Lord Julian was listening from the doorway the entire time. Clenching his teeth in fury, he knew he had to escape. Hours later, he trashed his fancy manor. Consumed by his failure, he destroyed the place until his lady came out to soothe his anger. Julian told her to start packing immediately. They had to flee before the Baron's men came for them. He knew this place was not safe anymore. Julian called for his loyal assistant, Silas, who hurried inside. He ordered Silas to gather their remaining men because they were fleeing the kingdom at midnight. And that's where we leave them for now. Trust me, this power struggle is only just beginning. All right, you and I are about to see Arthur build a literal kingdom in the apocalypse. With the survivors back at the keep, the mission was a success. He rescued 8 people instead of 5. That earned him a 25-point reward plus a 5-point bonus, bringing his total to 66. Arthur then told his partner Thorn that by tomorrow night, they were raiding the southern district. Lord Lewis asked what was south, and Arthur promised he had unfinished business at Beechwood Manor. That night, Arthur locked his doors to open a level 2 high-tech crate he could finally afford for 50 points. He quickly tapped the lid, desperate to see what his very first level 2 crate would give him. After the purchase, his point balance dropped to 16. Lights swirled as Arthur hoped this expensive crate was worth the points. Trust me, he hit the jackpot. Inside was a massive syringe filled with serum that could boost his physical stats by 20 points. Without wasting a second, he injected it. The pain was far worse than he ever expected. His physical stat hit 33, making him 6 times stronger than any normal man. It sharpened his senses, too. He heard a mosquito buzzing across the room and snatched it out of the air by its stinger. These new reflexes would be deadly in a fight. He let the bug go, fully satisfied with his power. At sunset, he patrolled the grounds with Thorn and saw Sir Bennet leading the new archers in practice. Soon after that, Arthur started his long trek toward the southern side of the city. Before leaving, he put the old officer in charge of training since he was their best sniper. Bennet agreed, happy to serve. With that settled, Arthur and Thorn began their march into the dead zone. The bus sped ahead. Trouble was already boiling over in the enemy camp. Lord Lewis ordered a retreat, but his escape plan was nowhere near as clever as he thought. The lords of Beechwood Manor arrived and blocked the exits. Inside the lead car sat the top bosses along with one very familiar woman. You see that smirk? Lord Sterling knows exactly what Lord Lewis is trying to pull here. Lewis lied through his teeth, claiming he was heading to the gardens under cover of darkness to finish a job. Usually, he could talk his way out of anything, but not this time. One of his men had already confessed. The Beechwood group immediately recognized the body of their fallen comrade. Even then, Lewis acted like a total stranger to the corpse, hoping his performance would save his neck. Sterling grew tired of the nonsense and ordered his men to open fire on the traitors' group. Lewis stood trembling as his guards fell. He still tried to pretend he knew absolutely nothing. Sterling knew how to break him. He pointed to the passenger seat, and Lewis finally realized he was finished. Clarissa had betrayed him too, just like she always did when a better offer came along. Lord Cedric was done playing games. Clarissa had already spilled the entire escape plan to the council. Honestly, Lewis should have known. She had ruined Arthur before jumping ship to join him. Finally, the Grandmaster gave a cold, silent signal to end Lord Lewis once and for all. They chose a brutal end, tightening a noose around his neck until the traitor finally stopped his struggling. A slow, miserable death. Once he was dead, they hung him from his own gates. Later, Arthur's blue bus rolled to a stop. He and Thorne moved in on foot, but at the gate, they saw they were too late. He wanted to kill Lewis himself, but someone else beat him to it. It was a shame, really. Arthur threw a stone to cut the rope, letting the body fall into the dirt. Seeing this end only made Arthur hungrier for revenge. Back at Beechwood, dark sounds came from the upper floor. Clarissa thought she could just switch sides and live like a queen among these new criminals. She was dead wrong. Her betrayal had landed her right in the middle of a den of monsters. The two vile bosses were truly disgusting people, but their time was finally running out. Lord Cedric looked out the window and froze at the sight of his dead guards outside. A knock suddenly hit the door. Arthur is here for blood, and trust me, you and I are about to watch him take it. All right, you and I are about to watch Silas execute one of the coldest revenge plots ever. He didn't hesitate, slitting Lord Kay's throat and leaving him to drown in his own blood. One down. Lord James stood frozen. One moment he was focused on Lady Catherine, the next his partner was dead. Catherine recognized Silas instantly, but he didn't care, hurling a dagger straight at the naked coward's throat. James collapsed with a sliced windpipe. As he hit the stone floor, Catherine let out a terrified shriek. She knew Silas wasn't there to rescue her. In fact, seeing him only made her blood run cold. Silas just gave her a mocking grin and slowly unlocked the door, wondering how Lord Leo would react. Now pay attention, because this door opening is where the true nightmare begins for these traitors. The mutated beast that was once Sir Galahad lunged forward, sinking his teeth deep into Catherine's neck. As she begged for mercy that never came, Silas simply shut the door on the two traitors who had once betrayed and murdered him. Stepping outside, he discussed how to handle the leftover bodies with his monstrous companion, Galahad. The dead guards were a perfect feast for the ghoul, though Galahad was nearly full from earlier. Still, a fresh corpse was far better than nothing at all in this cursed kingdom. While his companion fed, Silas used his magically enhanced hearing to pick up a disturbance nearby. Deep within a stronghold near Birch Hill, a group of terrified survivors was being held against their will by a brutal butcher and a vile thug. The thug grabbed a small girl for their next meal, but the butcher demanded someone much meatier. The girl was too thin. Instead, he set his cruel eyes on a young boy clinging to his mother. He dragged the boy away and backhanded the mother when she dared to beg for her son's life. She pleaded with the other captives for help, but they all stayed silent, just glad it wasn't them. Suddenly, heavy hand cannon fire blasted through the room, shattering the tense silence of the dungeon. 3 massive holes ripped through the door. The guards panicked, thinking only the High Lords had such power. Fortunately, the sudden chaos was just enough to delay the young boy's grisly fate. Now I know what you're thinking. Who's behind that door? Well, we're about to find out. A guard stepped out to check, but Galahad's gray hand shot out and crushed the man's throat instantly. Without even showing his face, Silas's monstrous partner had already neutralized one of the armed thugs. The others assumed a horde of ghouls had arrived and started firing wildly, wasting their precious ammunition. Galahad stayed in the shadows, circling the room and easily dodging every clumsy shot they fired. Finally, he smashed through a window and locked his sights directly on the butcher standing in the center. In one fluid motion, Galahad snapped the butcher's neck before the man could even scream. He didn't stop there, leaping from one target to the next until every goon was slaughtered. When the bloodbath ended, the survivors could only stare in shock as the monster spared their lives. Silas walked in and praised Galahad for the clean work, even with that heavy iron mask on. Galahad rasped back a reply, claiming the mask simply made him look much more intimidating. And he's not wrong. Hearing a monster talk only made the terrified survivors even more confused. Silas tried to break the tension, promising the shivering families that his companion wouldn't harm them. But one little girl didn't believe him. She'd seen these greater abominations kill without mercy before. That caught Silas's attention immediately. He leaned in and asked exactly what she meant by that. The mother explained they had witnessed a far more terrifying mutant back in Eastcrest City. Silas hadn't expected high-tier mutants this early. Even worse, Eastcrest was dangerously close to their base. He warned Galahad that another rare cursed one might be lurking in the nearby shadows. Some cursed ones manage to keep their memories, which makes them far more dangerous, while the unstable ones become mindless engines of destruction. That grim possibility made Galahad visibly uneasy about his own dark future as a monster. Silas reassured him, promising that as long as they stayed together, Galahad would keep his humanity. He then asked about other survivors, and they pointed him toward the locked basement sales office. And trust me, you and I are going to want to see what's waiting behind that door. You and I are about to witness the absolute horror hidden behind those doors. The Blackwood Manor butchers were keeping human meat here. This explained why no other survivor groups were left in these dark woods. Captives had seen those monsters regularly hauling massive crates of provisions out of the city gates. Looking at the bodies in the cellar, Arthur could sense the massive scale of the slaughter. This was something far more sinister. Since the basement was empty, the last place to check was the outpost nearly a mile away by the south gate. That was where new refugees were screened first, and the useless ones were discarded like trash. Arthur received a new quest called Broken Paradise, forcing him to grow and improve his influence level. The guards at the gatehouse, still, had no clue that their entire operation had already been wiped out. Now watch closely. Under the cover of night, Sir Thomas took out the guards while they assumed the noise was just target practice. Inside the outpost, several women were still trapped. The state of the room told a sickening story of their ordeal. Hearing the commotion outside, some had simply given up, while others clung to a tiny spark of hope. When the heavy door finally swung open, it wasn't another filthy guard from the manor. It was a young warrior with a gaze like cold steel. Arthur told the women to follow him and his group. They marched out of the outpost, stepping over the blood and mangled bodies of the dead guards. Arthur promised them a safe haven and a real home. His only rule: everyone had to work to help the kingdom grow. After the hell they had endured at the manor, that deal sounded like a dream come true. Arthur led them to his convoy. This time, he had brought enough heavy wagons to carry every single person home. Before long, they reached the citadel gates. Silas and Julian were already there, waiting for his return. Since he didn't pull the wagons straight in, Silas watched carefully to see what his leader had planned. Arthur introduced their new home, but made it clear that no one entered the inner fortress without being vetted first. The survivors understood the caution. For now, they were settled in the temporary barracks just outside the iron fences. It wasn't as secure as the high walls of the citadel, but compared to the city, it felt like paradise. Trust me, Arthur is building something massive here, and the survivors wept with joy as he promised them a better future. Night turned to dawn. Then a grim parade of armored carriages rolled up to the gates of Blackwood Manor. Lady Rowena was losing patience. Lord Geoffrey and every man she left in charge had stopped answering her calls. Sensing a disaster, she dismounted and checked the main buildings for any sign of her men. It was a bloodbath. The people slaughtered the night before had already risen as mindless, starving, and violent ghouls. One was Leonard. He lunged at the living with a primal, guttural roar of hunger. Lady Rowena barely even looked at them before crushing the ghouls with her bare hands and hacking them into pieces. With the manor fallen, the puppets she had installed here were all dead. Their supply of meat was ruined, and they had a massive mess to clean. First, they needed to find whoever destroyed Blackwood Manor. More blood was going to spill. Her knights reported that not a single survivor was left alive in the manor. The only silver lining was that enough meat remained in the cellar for today's shipment. They loaded the wagons while Lady Rowena plotted her next move, her eyes burning with a cold, dark rage. Scouring the dirt, she found heavy wagon tracks leading away, a direct trail to the culprits. Meanwhile, back at the Citadel, Arthur was pondering his expansion quest. Even after bringing in many survivors, his influence score was still only 2. This made no sense if numbers were all that mattered. Fortunately, the arrogant noble who sold him the deed had done him a favor. But expansion wasn't his only worry. A rare, mutated beast in the nearby town needed his attention. Alongside Silas and Julian, he visited the barracks where the newcomers greeted him like a literal god. After getting settled with warm beds and food, some even knelt in the dirt to thank him. But Arthur was there for answers, specifically, more details on the monster the mother and daughter had described. The mother said they encountered it at the South Market while scavenging for supplies. Several good people died. She had grabbed her child and fled through the chaos all the way to the manor, only to be captured by even worse monsters. Arthur had the location. Stick with me, this hunt will be legendary. Trust me, you're about to see why Cedric is built different. Sarah and Arthur tried to stop him, but he wasn't there for loot. Shadowburg was less than 2 kilometers from their stronghold, and he couldn't let a threat like that linger so close. Even the survivor who saw the beast tried to warn him, but Cedric assured them all that he knew exactly what he was doing. He only needed Silas by his side to face that monster. Meanwhile, a tough-looking group of scavengers was searching Ravensgate for supplies. They stumbled upon a massive royal granary and got hyped about the mountain of loot they could take. They knew it might be picked clean, but they marched in anyway, confident they could survive anything this ruined world threw at them. Darkness swallowed them whole. Once their eyes adjusted, they saw the vault had been raided, but there was still plenty left behind. Watching for hidden ghouls, they huddled close and made some noise, listening intently for any movement in the shadows. A few wandering undead soon emerged, but the group kept their cool as they systematically took them down. Working in perfect sync, they executed the ghouls in one clean, coordinated strike. Now pay attention, because their relief is about to be short-lived. They figured the horde was gone, but they stayed alert while scavenging. They had no idea that something far more intelligent was lurking in the darkness, stalking them like fresh prey. Moving deeper, they felt like they'd struck gold, finding enough food to last them for years. While the crew drooled over the food, their leader, Lady Alara, wandered off and happily flopped onto a soft, silk mattress. Some of them even joked about moving in, since this place seemed to have everything they needed. As they explored, 2 scouts stepped out for a break and admitted that, as tempting as it was, this vault made for a terrible base. Too many doors to defend, and all this loot would eventually draw in every raider in the kingdom. A nearby stone manor looked much safer, but to settle down, they'd actually have to survive the night first. By then, the hunter had emerged from the void to begin its slaughter. A straggler's scream for help shattered the silence, grabbing everyone's attention. He bolted back inside as fast as humanly possible, but nobody outruns an apex mutant. The beast drove its back claws straight through his ribs, ending his life in one gruesome, brutal motion. The monster tore him apart like wet paper, The others froze in pure horror. Someone screamed to run, but their legs felt like lead. They forced themselves to move, but escape was impossible. One by one, the slowest were dragged kicking into the dark. They poured every ounce of their will to live into every frantic step. I know what you're thinking. Within seconds, the entire crew was slaughtered, leaving only Lady Alara alive to face the end. She sprinted for the exit, finally catching a glimpse of the daylight ahead. She pushed forward with her last breath, but fancy shoes are a death sentence during a chase. The mutant loomed over her, savoring her terror. She sobbed and threw her arms up, desperately trying to shield herself. But when she looked up, she saw a different beast, one wearing a mask. Instead of killing her, he simply walked right past. Cedric followed behind, telling her not to panic. He and his team had arrived just in time to save her life. To her shock, she recognized him as the young noble who bought a massive estate from her before the world fell. Cedric remembered her too, the polite trade agent from the old world. If he was right, her name was Alara or Lady Wan. Their reunion was cut short by the sickening sound of flesh being torn apart. Alara warned him about the demon in the vault, but Cedric calmly said it was being handled. She looked back and saw the two titans clashing. The vault beast saw Silas as a rival, while Silas only saw something that needed to be crushed. It was the first time either had met another of their own kind, and they were both itching for a fight. The beast slashed with its claws, barely missing Silas. It even seemed to wonder if eating its own kind would help it evolve faster. As the beast laughed, Silas answered with a thunderous punch. The blow was so heavy it smashed the monster's head into the stone floor. Now the freak had to stop playing games and take Silas seriously. Silas lifted his massive boot right over the monster's head. Kicking an enemy while they're down was totally fair here, but the pale freak was fast enough to leap away. Still laughing, the mutant seemed grateful for the humans it had devoured, growing stronger every day. Silas's instincts screamed of another incoming attack. The beast lunged right at his face, looking even more savage than before. They traded dozens of lightning-fast blows in an instant. Arthur worried that Silas was losing ground for the first time, but Cedric was just glad they showed up when they did. You and I just witnessed a true nightmare, but to end it, Cedric pulled out a heavy rifle like it appeared from thin air. All right, you and I are about to see Arthur casually order Magnus to pin the beast for 1 second. As always, the giant mutant knight obeyed, locking the monster down to stop its unnatural speed. Thunderous hand cannon shots echoed through the hall. One bullet shattered the creature's skull, turning its brain to mush. But even that wasn't enough to kill a Goliath. It was hurt, though, and turned its focus toward Arthur. Cedric was stunned. He had never seen something survive a clean shot to the head before. If one shot failed, Arthur added more, switching to full auto. The heavy rounds chewed the beast into rotting green meat. When it finally hit the floor, its massive frame gave one last twitch. Arthur suggested Magnus devour the fallen mutant, hoping the essence would grant him a massive power boost. Surprisingly, slaying such a nightmare increased his reputation with the house and pushed his holy mission forward. Since the grand stores were still mostly untouched, they decided to grab supplies. Arthur's storage magic made the looting easy. No carts or heavy lifting needed. He just stashed everything in his private dimension. Crude as it was, they figured the walking dead shouldn't be left to turn, so Magnus got dessert after his meal. While Arthur was away, some rats were plotting. Lady Rosaline and her scouts followed their tracks to spy on the fortress. From the shadows, they measured the size of the stronghold. Rosaline's captain noted many people inside but weak weaponry. Their only real defense was the massive, stone-walled storage house. If that was all, how had they wiped out Lord Sterling, Sir Geoffrey, and everyone at Winter Valley? Rosaline guessed they used cowardly tricks, perhaps leading a massive horde of the undead into battle. Watch this, the arrogant Lady Rosaline was already thanking the gods for her new base. She planned to return, gather her full army, and strike when the fortress least expected it. The scouts turned their steeds and fled. Coming from the other direction, Arthur's group was heading home. Cedric told Gwendolyn their base had not just beds, but hot water too. Seeing other carriages on the King's Road was rare, so the group immediately drew their weapons in tension. The two carriages passed without slowing, but for one sharp moment, Arthur and Lady Rosaline sensed each other's hidden power. A new quest appeared, Rivalry Part 1. If Arthur stopped the coming invasion, he would earn 50 points. He felt it instantly. Those suspicious drivers were definitely the invaders coming for them. To be certain, he climbed to Alina in the watchtower and asked about any movement near the walls. She mentioned a carriage in the distance that never got close enough for an alarm. That was all Arthur needed. He called for Sir Thomas and old Lee to gather everyone for a meeting. Meanwhile, things at the Black Mines were going smoothly. Using a crackling magic broadcast stone, Rosaline's group lured survivors toward the mines with promises of a safe zone that needed workers. The survivors were cautious. Anyone still alive in these dark times had to be somewhat capable. Soon, they saw a carriage approaching. It was Lady Rosaline returning from her scout mission to welcome the new commoners. You and I know what happens next. Once they saw Rosaline's beauty, their caution completely vanished. She knew exactly how to use her charms to lower their guard. Smiling, she invited them into the camp. As they headed toward the mines, the survivors traded dirty little grins, staring at how large and clean the place was. It felt like they'd finally found a true sanctuary. One of them asked to use the private washroom inside. Rosaline offered to lead him there herself. The fool took the bait, unaware that she had a darker motive. She stayed while he prepared, sizing him up. Thinking she was interested, he bragged about his great strength and courage. One quick strike, and a hidden blade ended the talk. Lady Rosaline killed him instantly. He never saw it coming. She had considered keeping him if he was worth it. But after seeing his weakness, killing him was the easy choice. Outside, her knights did their part too. Every survivor lured by the broadcast was slaughtered without a word. Back at the fortress, everyone answered Arthur's call to discuss the coming battle for their lives. Old Lee asked who would dare target them. Arthur warned that an attack could come at any hour. To prepare, Cedric and Magnus would follow the boss to clear the unfinished manor southeast of the base. The refugees had to be moved there, so they wouldn't be caught in the open during the siege. Alina and several others volunteered to help. Even the twin knights who looked nothing alike joined the mission. Caught in the mood, even young Will volunteered. Trust me, you and I are going to want to see this. All right, you and I are diving into a world where mercy is a death sentence. Arthur led the main force out to clear the path, leaving Silas and Miller to guard the walls. Chaos erupted the moment they breached the south wing, lead and steel tearing through the undead horde. It was a bloody grind, sharpening their instincts for the war ahead. Once the floor was clear, Arthur called for a breather. He didn't sugarcoat it. The real nightmare was just beginning. Their mission was to hold the south wing and purge it. When the survivors arrived, they begged for a chance to fight back. Arthur realized he couldn't win this battle alone. He needed more soldiers, not just refugees, so he promised to arm them with pistols and ammo by the end of the day. Constant contact was key. The south wing and the main fortress stayed synced via their radios. Meanwhile, over at the Iron Works, Lady Raven presided over her twisted cannibalistic empire. Her top lieutenant, a massive freak who looked like a walking war machine, and her number 3 were hungry for fresh meat. Raven was still seething over the loss of Blackwood Ridge. Without their suppliers, they had to hunt their own food. Her goons weren't thrilled about the extra work, but they already had a target in mind for some bloody payback. Tomorrow morning, Raven and her heavy hitter would lead a full-scale raid on the unsuspecting survivors. Back at the fortress, the sun went down and Arthur finally pulled up his mysterious system interface. Now pay attention, because Arthur is about to gamble his points on something massive. He found a level 2 awakening crate for 25 points, plus 2 other supply crates in the store. The 2 level 2 crates would cost 40 points, but he decided to go all in anyway. He cracked open the priciest crate he had ever touched and unlocked the overload skill. It grants a 25% boost to all physical stats, but causes extreme exhaustion afterward. With his strength already reaching insane levels, this would push him to hit 8 times harder than a normal human. Arthur was itching for a target to test this power on. He did not have to wait long. At dawn, a massive convoy of trucks and bikes roared out from the iron works, heading toward the east. Lady Raven laid it out one last time. Step 1, mow down every refugee outside the gate. Then, her monster would breach the entrance, while the rest of the gang provided heavy covering fire. That monster, the butcher, didn't even wear a shirt. As the enemy got closer, the fortress went on full alert. Miller took his position at the highest peak. He was hidden from below, but his view of the field was perfect. Arthur chose him for a reason. Turns out, Miller was a master marksman before he became a cop. Miller just laughed it off, claiming he had only played the role of a sniper for a few months. Still, with a steady wind, he could drop a target at 500 meters without breaking a sweat. Arthur had Julian haul a massive crate to the roof. Inside sat a pristine Barrett sniper rifle. Check this out. Imagine the look on Miller's face when he saw this absolute beast of a weapon. Arthur warned him they only had 10 rounds. In this fight, every single shot has to be a kill. Miller gripped the heavy steel, feeling the weight of their survival on his shoulders. Everyone was in position. The air was tense. Suddenly, Sarah spotted a cloud of dust from the watchtower and sounded the alarm. Miller peered through the high-powered scope. The enemy fleet was coming, and they were coming fast. Inside her command car, Lady Raven was confused that the refugees were gone. But she didn't care. She ordered them to floor it. They were already in the kill zone. Stopping now meant losing their only advantage, momentum. The convoy charged forward, racing for the cover of the walls. Then, Sarah gave the signal to fire. The walls erupted. Every defender opened up with pistols and AKs, turning the road into a meat grinder. The Ironworks gang wasn't ready for this much firepower. Bullets shredded windshields and bodies in seconds. Their surprise attack had been flipped. They were the ones walking into a total execution. Raven was shocked they were spotted so early, but she screamed for them to keep charging through the lead rain. Her sheer ruthlessness worked. A handful of vehicles actually reached the base of the fortress wall. Everything depended on the butcher. He leapt out with a giant automatic saw, heading straight for the gate. He began hacking into the thick metal with terrifying strength. Sarah screamed for the watchtower to take him down. So, you and I will have to wait and see if that gate holds. To keep their heavy hitter moving, Lady Regina and her squad opened fire with pistols and submachine guns. The pressure was too much for the rookies in the watchtower. Even poor Barnaby caught a bullet in the shoulder, though luckily it was not fatal. All right, stick with me. We are about to see if this fortress can actually survive a professional siege. The veterans tried to keep the younger fighters steady. As long as they had ammo, they still had a fighting chance. But that would not matter if the saw cut through the gate. Once it broke, they would lose their only advantage. Thankfully, Arthur already had a countermove ready. He slipped out of the fortress like a ghost, completely undetected. He sprinted through the crossfire like he was bulletproof. By now, Lady Regina's squad had used half their ammo, and the gate still held. The beast needed just a few more seconds. Suddenly, boom, the main entrance finally burst open. Sarah and the tower guard rushed down to reinforce the breach. Regina just smirked. The hard part was supposedly over. Now she was ready to watch these amateurs get torn apart by a monster powered by human flesh. She used the beast as a living shield, keeping her men tucked close behind his massive frame as he ripped the opening wider. With the targets finally in the open, Arthur signaled Silas that it was officially showtime. Silas calmed his breathing and lined up the giant. The moment that massive head appeared, his crosshairs locked on like he had a cheat code. The beast let out a roar that sounded more like a demon than a man. Anyone watching would have felt their blood turn to ice. Now watch closely, because when this monster steps through, the morale of the defenders absolutely hits rock bottom. They unleashed everything they had, but the bullets just bounced off his hide. He did not even need armor. he was a walking tank. The rounds only left tiny marks before bouncing off, and even those marks vanished fast thanks to his insane healing. Lady Regina loved seeing the terror in their eyes. To her, this was just a masterclass in what a true evolver could do. But then the signal reached Silas on the roof. He knew exactly what his Barrett sniper rifle was capable of. The rifle kicked like a mule. One shot was all it took to turn the monster's head into a mess of red mist and bone. Just like that, the invincible beast dropped dead. Regina and her crew froze. Their only cover was gone in an instant. No one expected this tiny base to have a weapon like that. With their shield gone, Arthur suddenly appeared, flanking the intruders with his AK-47. He opened fire immediately, snapping the invaders out of their shock with a hail of lead. You and I saw this coming, right? Regina totally underestimated them, and now her team is paying the ultimate price. She was not going down easy, though. Clutching her submachine gun, she sprayed cover fire while sprinting back toward the exit. Grit and desperation were the only things keeping her moving as she tried to make a break for it. When she locked eyes with Arthur, she realized he was the same kid they had passed yesterday. To save herself, she grabbed one of her own men. Without a second thought, she used him as a human shield. Arthur noticed her inhuman speed and knew she was an evolver too. After taking a burst of lead, the unlucky goon was thrown at Arthur to block his path. Arthur had to dive out of the way and stop his assault for a split second. That was the only window Regina needed to reach her car, but Silas was not about to let these invaders walk away after wrecking their peace. He lined up another shot, treating his heavy rifle like the strongest thing under heaven and earth. This guy really thought he was a legendary marksman. He missed the clean headshot, but managed to blast her super fast legs right off. Losing her limbs sent Regina crashing into the dirt just inches from safety. Silas felt terrible for missing the kill shot. Before he could chamber another round, one of her underlings dragged her into the car and slammed it into gear. They knew how to disappear fast, swerving away with their tails between their legs. Arthur finally gave the order to cease fire. He did not mind if those idiots came back later. He was just relieved the system mission was finally marked as complete. The reward was 50 points, which lifted everyone's mood. Plus, the next stage of the Nemesis quest just unlocked. Now it was his turn to take the fight to the cannibals for another easy 50. The whole fortress started celebrating the victory. As for their side, a few people were patched up with bullet wounds, but miraculously nobody was killed. The wounded headed to the infirmary, while the enemy bodies were hauled off to the freezer for Master Thorne's dinner. With the danger over, the refugees were finally allowed to head back to their housing. Once he was alone, Arthur checked his total points and started planning his next big upgrade for that night. Back at the coal plant in the south, only 3 survivors limped through the gates, and Lady Regina was missing a leg. And that is where we leave it. You and I just witnessed a total disaster for Regina. Trust me, it only gets wilder from here. You and I are about to watch a kingdom fall from within. Rowena demanded human meat to recover, acting like nothing happened. Lady Rowena kept spitting insults, calling her men useless filth who weren't even worth her dead champion's boots. That was the final insult for Sir Thomas. She was broken and weak, yet still dared to treat them like dogs. Rowena never saw the coup coming. Panicked, she screamed for her guards to strike Thomas down, but not a single blade moved. Even the knights who carried her back stood silent. With Rowena crippled and her champion dead, Sir Thomas was now the strongest man in the room. The men were done with the lady's cruel reign, and finally, they saw their chance to seize power for themselves. Now watch this part carefully. Rowena tried to maintain her authority, but her mask of courage shattered when they closed in. Following Sir Thomas's lead, the mercenaries of the Blackwood camp unleashed every ounce of their stored rage upon her. They battered Rowena with iron bars, their cheers echoing through the camp. Since she was an awakened, the brutal beating dragged on for quite a long time. When she finally perished, Thomas grinned while casually wiping the royal blood from his hands. One man called him captain, and Thomas nearly beat him to death. From now on, he was the high commander. With the old regime dead, the group began debating their next move. Without Lady Rowena, the mercenaries were vulnerable. They didn't fear the Eastreach citadel anymore. It was the tentacle abomination they truly dreaded. High Commander Thomas decided to abandon their post and seek an alliance with the Ironclad Guild instead. A day later, Arthur led his scouts behind enemy lines. Just as he suspected, the mercenaries were still holed up at the old works. He signaled Julian and Silas to stay quiet as they moved in. To their surprise, the camp was completely deserted. The only thing they found was the noblewoman from the battle, lying dead and broken in the dirt. Her own men had clearly turned on her. Julian and Silas were stunned, but Arthur had already seen this coming. Julian asked about the giant who smashed the gates. He was clearly different from Cedric, yet just as strange. Arthur had mentioned the Awakened before, and now even Silas wanted to know how a commoner gains such power. Arthur's answer was blunt. One way to gain power is by consuming human flesh. You and I both find that sickening. He explained that cannibalism was the shortcut to gaining these dark, mutated abilities. Since Arthur also possessed superhuman strength, Julian nervously asked if he had sacrificed his own humanity to achieve it. Arthur stopped them there. Cannibalism is the fast track, but not the only way. He then revealed a glowing crimson essence stone. Both the Awakened and the Blighted are mutated, growing stronger by absorbing this ancient, exotic energy. Common folk have a trace of it, but it is too weak and scattered within them. The Awakened condense this power into cores. As the plague spreads, even the common undead will form them. Eating the heart of a monster sounded like a death sentence. Arthur warned that normal men cannot survive such consumption. Only mutants like Brother Cedric can feast on that tainted meat to grow their power. Arthur saw his quest was fulfilled. The Blackwood mercenaries were clearly no longer a threat to the realm. While Arthur checked his fate's ledger, a stray undead lunged. Fortunately, his instincts were razor-sharp and saved him. He ended it with a single, fluid strike of his blade. This creature was the perfect specimen for his lesson. He reached into the carcass and pulled out a core, announcing that the season of the hunt had finally begun. Holding 2 essence stones, he offered them to Julian and Silas to trigger their own awakening. Julian couldn't stomach the origin of the stones and declined, but Silas chose the path of power over fear. He swallowed both stones at once. Silas felt the surge immediately as his body evolved rapidly, though Arthur warned him that being an Awakened doesn't make him an invincible god. Silas took the warning to heart, vowing to stay humble. With the threat neutralized, it was finally time to return to their kingdom. The remnants of the Blackwood mercenaries arrived at the Ironclad Foundry, where a sentry blocked their path. High Commander Thomas introduced himself as the new leader. Cautious, the guard told them to wait while he alerted the Foundry master. After a brief negotiation, the ragged group was allowed to pass through the gates. The Foundry masters wasted no time, asking what happened to Lady Rowena and her champion. Thomas lied, claiming they were ambushed and lost Rowena. This caught the master's attention immediately, and he ordered the survivors to be taken to a secure, safe house. Meanwhile, the master met with his associate to plot a dark fate, while Thomas remained locked away. He's still obsessed over his title. You and I know he's finished. All right, stick with me because you're about to see a supposedly smart man walk straight into a trap that everyone else saw coming. This was no safe house. The bars and heavy locks made it clear they were trapped in a dungeon. Before they could even move, the head jailer burst in and ordered everyone out into the courtyard. Outside, the entire legion of Ironwood's stronghold had gathered, and Sir Julian nervously asked what in the world was happening. Countess Lyra pointed a finger, accusing him of betraying Lord Roland, a crime that only had one possible punishment. Julian desperately tried to deny the charges, but Boss Lyra didn't buy the lie and summoned her champion, Sir Alaric, to report the grim truth he uncovered. Alaric reported that Lord Roland was dead in the Asherton mines, and the other commander had completely vanished. There were zero signs of a struggle, leaving betrayal as the only logical explanation for the massacre. Julian kept pleading his innocence, but in this brutal world, nobody waits around for a fair trial. See, Ironwood only tolerated the Asherton mines because they feared the massive power Lord Roland possessed. With him gone, Julian had walked straight into a den of hungry wolves until one of his men begged for mercy by offering vital secrets for his life. Boss Lyra leaned back and let him speak, looking completely bored by the man's desperate groveling. The rat revealed a fortress to the east brimming with supplies, the same place where Lord Roland met his end. When asked about the fortress' strength, he claimed they were a match for Ironwood, which was news that the Lord simply could not ignore. Pay attention now, because this one detail about the unevolved peasants is what changes everything for our ambitious villains. Sir Alaric listened intently, though the mention of these ascended knights seemed to confuse him. The lords couldn't believe Roland lost to peasants, until the rat mentioned their massive enchanted siege engines. Lyra loved the intel, but she had absolutely zero intention of letting a traitorous rat live. The moment the order was given, the Asherton men screamed for mercy until every last voice was silenced. The Asherton faction was wiped out, leaving Lord Pang deeply worried about the growing threat from the east. Lyra advised against an immediate attack, fearing those deadly siege engines would tear their army apart. They would evolve more knights first, and send scouts to see if the Easterners were truly weaklings. Back at his castle, Arthur Vance relaxed in his chambers, scrolling through his sovereign system shop. He was shocked to find a level 2 ancient relic box available for only 50 marks. Without a second thought, he bought everything in sight, leaving himself with 71 marks remaining. The supply crates provided 500 kilos of top-tier flour, oils, and rare spices for the settlement. But the prize was a physical enhancement elixir, plus 20 strength, until a sudden knock hit the door. Sarah entered with urgent news, reporting that a suspicious scout had been caught prowling the outer walls. Arthur went to investigate, finding his guards holding a man who claimed he wasn't an enemy. The man insisted on speaking only with the Lord, and once Arthur arrived, he finally spoke. He introduced himself as Silas from Ironwood Stronghold, a name that immediately put Uncle Cedric on alert. Cedric knew Ironwood was a massive duchy to the southwest, one of the greatest powers around. It was only 3 miles away, so Arthur wondered why Silas had traveled all this distance. Silas stood tall and puffed his chest, claiming all survivors should work together in these dark times. He said his lord wanted to recruit them, but Arthur saw him hiding a hand-drawn map. When they snatched the map, Silas just gave a nervous smile, hoping his lies were working. Let's find out if this spy can fool Arthur's spirit vision, because things are about to get real. Arthur didn't play nice, pressing a blade to the man's throat because he hated being played for a fool. If Silas didn't start telling the truth immediately, his head was going to roll right then and there. Despite the blade, Silas gulped and stuck to his story, claiming his masters were just being cautious. Arthur pulled his guard aside to check if the spy saw their secret weapon, then ordered Silas released. He even handed the map back, leaving Silas thrilled that his little performance had actually worked. As the scout hurried away, Arthur watched with a cold smile, already planning his next move. And honestly, you and I both know Arthur is just counting how many system points that duchy is worth. 5 peaceful months passed, but over at Ironwood, the lords were sweating as their knights began vanishing. All right, you and I are about to dive into a world where nightmares walk the earth. Scavengers heard rustling in the waste heaps and froze. Before one could flee to warn the guard, he was silenced. A cold blade ended him instantly. The dying screams reached Sir Alistair as they echoed from the piles of rot. The sole survivor of the waste crew blamed the shadow abomination for his comrade's brutal end. Any mention of that horror demanded blood. This time, the beast had struck in the light of day. Alistair grabbed his crossbow, ordered the peasants to hide, and took knights with swift magic. At the waste piles, they saw a shadow. 𝒂𝒓𝒍𝒂𝒚𝒆𝒅 commanded his men to avoid a fight. If spotted, their only duty was to retreat and survive. Upon inspection, the beast they feared was gone. Only tracks remained. Perhaps it had already dragged its meal away. Since the fall of beechwood and the coal mines, these disappearances across the realm had only grown more frequent. Previously, the monster roamed far and wide. Now, the ironworks citadel had become its primary hunting ground. Yet, 𝒂𝒓𝒍𝒂𝒚𝒆𝒅 suspected this was not the beast's work. Back at Highgarden, their progress over 5 months was undeniable. Arthur had already outlived his previous life. If this continued, restoring the kingdom might actually be possible. His community score climbed to 38. Even now, the prophecy regarding the ironworks had not triggered. Meanwhile, his inner circle had been working tirelessly. When Lady Sarah and the knights returned from their quest, Arthur showed off by leaping from the battlements to the dirt. He reported that the hunt was a success. With their current power, no one could oppose them. Even young Shane had started joining the men on raids. Master Silas had been training him, and he was becoming a warrior. Today, he even felled a blighted alone. The Highgarden team had been purging the blighted, removing threats, and searching for potential noble allies. All while gathering every mana shard they found. Arthur still doubted the ironworks would ever be an ally. Now pay attention, because this is where Arthur decides to take the ultimate risk. Old Lee protested loudly. Lord Robert warned that enemy scouts had been circling their lands for months already. Arthur reassured them. With his current strength, even the strongest knight couldn't lay a finger on him. It was time to find out if the ironworks were friends or foes to the crown. He left Lord Robert and his inner circle to guard Highgarden and the village. Everyone was still worried. Without Arthur, the settlement risked falling into chaos. Back at the ironworks, 𝒂𝒓𝒍𝒂𝒚𝒆𝒅 returned from the waste heaps. He attempted to speak with the lords, but the palace guards blocked his path at the heavy doors. Enraged, 𝒂𝒓𝒍𝒂𝒚𝒆𝒅 seized a guard by the throat. He realized he was losing control again and forced a breath. He released the man and apologized. The truth was, 𝒂𝒓𝒍𝒂𝒚𝒆𝒅 had been terrified of these violent outbursts for months. Controlling his temper was becoming impossible. Once the lords heard his voice, they finally granted him entry. 𝒂𝒓𝒍𝒂𝒚𝒆𝒅 entered cautiously and found Duchess Alara alone. He offered a different theory for the recent murders. At a recent crime scene, he had found a woman's footprints. Perhaps the monster was not the only killer. You see where this is going, right? The real monster isn't the one they're hunting. The legend of the shadow abomination had already petrified the entire fiefdom. They could not risk the peasants hiding in their homes. 𝒂𝒓𝒍𝒂𝒚𝒆𝒅 tried to argue, but the Duchess silenced him. He awkwardly took his leave. 𝒂𝒓𝒍𝒂𝒚𝒆𝒅 was a hardened knight, but in the presence of Alara, he crumbled. Then a mocking voice echoed from the shadows, calling the Duchess reckless for her games. Alara snapped that she could find another henchman. The voice belonged to Peter, who was butchering a corpse. Lately, Alara did the killing and Peter handled the grisly cleanup. They discarded the heads and feasted on the rest. Meanwhile, Arthur continued slaying the blighted toward the ironworks. To get close, he needed a disguise. He drew a pair of shears and did something truly mad. He hacked his hair off with eyes closed. Then, he smeared thick mud and filth across his face. To finish the transformation, he donned spectacles. For someone trying to look like a beggar, he looked striking. As he approached the ironworks, a sharp-eyed patrol guard spotted him from a distance. And that's where we leave it, trust me. You're going to want to see what happens next. Let's watch as Alaric infiltrates a fortress of absolute madness together. Alaric spun a tale about his 10-man squad being slaughtered by a horde of the Blight, leaving him as the only survivor. When asked about his strength, he claimed he was just a survivor who got good at killing the undead. The gatekeeper was really trying to figure out if Alaric was one of the awakened. Since Alaric said nothing about his power, the guard led him inside, explaining he had to pass a trial first. From that alone, Alaric knew this iron keep was crawling with dangerous vipers. As they reached the gates, Sir Lionel noticed the stranger being escorted into the fortress. The guard fumbled through a weak excuse, but Lionel wasn't buying it. Watch this night closely. If a search was needed, it would happen here. He ordered the stranger to disarm immediately. Alaric hesitated, stating he wasn't fond of entering a lion's den without his steel. Lionel respected the caution, but rules were rules. Give up the blade or be turned away. It mattered little, as Alaric had hidden weapons. Lionel gave him a very thorough pat-down. Alaric was surprised to find a man with actual honor in such a wretched, rotten place. This knight was a far cry from the savages he'd fought at the other outposts. Seeing he survived the wilds with only a dagger, Lionel asked if he was awakened, but Alaric played dumb and said he just felt stronger. To be safe, Lionel took him to the Lord. Alaric was placed in a reception room. It felt more like a dungeon cell, with a door reinforced like a high-security prison. Minutes later, Lord Felon entered and demanded to know the stranger's name. Alaric gave a false name, Julian. Felon had to confirm if Julian was truly an awakened. Suddenly, the bald lord hurled a hatchet at his face. Julian just tilted his head aside. He considered striking back, but realized the man was clearly just testing his reflexes. You saw that coming, right? Well, Julian stays in character and screams at the Lord. That dodge proved everything. Since both were awakened, Felon pressed him to explain his evolution. He hinted at the dark sacrament and warned Julian to keep the forbidden secret hidden. Only a few know. If it leaks, Felon will kill him. He lunged, threatening Julian's neck. Good thing, it was just a threat to keep him in line. If Felon had truly rushed him with a weapon, Alaric would have fought back, but killing the Lord now would ruin the mission reward. Felon seemed impressed that he reacted fast enough to draw steel. Still, he warned that while the kid was fast, he was nowhere near a lord's level. Any thoughts of resistance should stay buried. Felon ordered his men to wash and clothe him. Now clean and tidy, Julian was taken to meet the rest of the high-ranking awakened. Felon introduced Lady Helena as his partner, with Lionel and Silas serving as settlement officers. Silas was the one tasked with showing the newcomer how this place actually worked. Helena praised him for finding the strongest keep. Here, survival was easy if you were useful. Julian promised to follow orders. Everything was falling into place exactly as he planned. He arrived just in time for a patrol. After choosing Silas and Cedric, the group headed out, though Cedric clearly despised the new guy joining them. Since Julian knew the dark secret, this was the only squad he could be placed in. During the patrol, Cedric kept staring, but Silas was fair and explained the camp's laws. In this keep, only the lords and this team knew that eating humans granted them power. Silas was Felon's cousin, and Cedric was Helena's nephew. Since they are family, any leak would fall on the outsider. That made Alaric uneasy, especially with the way Cedric was glaring at him. He recognized that old man from a previous encounter months ago, and then there was the knight, Lionel. He was a gifted officer, but knew nothing of the cannibalism still happening in the keep. If Lionel ever found out, the lords would surely hang his body from the walls. The bosses were suppressing Lionel because his natural talent surpassed every one of them. And that's where we leave it. You and I know things are about to get bloody. All right, you and I are about to see how dark things get when knights lose their humanity. Sir Hang Bin simply laughed at Zhang Ye's questions. He claimed raising peasants was better than hunting them, telling Zhang Ye to drop his morals and embrace their new reality as masters. To these awakened elites, normal people weren't even the same species anymore. They saw themselves as the ultimate predators of this realm. The plan was simple: seize the camp, keep them like cattle, and slaughter them whenever they needed more resources. They only needed 5 or 6 survivors. The rest were expendable. For now, the new recruit just had to sit back and watch. This small band of refugees had lived in peace for months, working hard every day to fortify their humble sanctuary. But as they worked, a massive horde of ghouls suddenly swarmed their hidden woodland shelter. Now watch this. Having a crossbow means nothing if your heart fails you the moment it is time to pull the trigger. As his friends fell one by one, a lone builder could only tremble in terror, waiting for his own gruesome end. Meanwhile, Jiang Ye and the patrol just watched from the ridge, listening to the screams. Hangbin insisted this cruelty was necessary. They lacked the grain to feed a large crowd. Once the ghouls had thinned the numbers, Hangbin's squad finally charged into the fray. One maiden shrieked as the monsters closed in. Then, with a single flash of steel, the ghouls surrounding her were decapitated in an instant. She froze in shock. A second ago, she was certain she was dead, and now her savior was offering a helping hand. Hangbin fought with a heavy mace, while Ashing used twin daggers, swift and lethal. After the slaughter, Hangbin introduced them as elites from the Iron Citadel. The peasants didn't know what an awakened knight was, but they were deeply grateful. That brief skirmish gave Jiang Ye vital intel. Hangbin's squad seemed roughly equal in strength to the other noble sub-factions. Suddenly, his entire body tensed as he sensed a dark, hungry presence lurking in the nearby ruins. He peered into a dark chamber in a shattered building. Seeing nothing, he tried to dismiss the feeling as mere imagination. Hangbin called him over to help clear the field. Still, Jiang Ye couldn't shake the chilling sensation from that abandoned stone tower. You saw that too, right? Something truly monstrous is lurking in those shadows, listening to the clueless survivors talk. They still had grain in a cellar. Jiang Ye stayed to oversee the gathering, while the others prepared a heavy wagon for the haul. He also had the grim task of stacking the bodies of the peasants who had just perished. The surviving refugees followed Hangbin like he was a god, which worked out perfectly for Jiang Ye. It gave him space to move unnoticed. On the road back to the citadel, the peasants kept offering thanks. One naive girl asked Chang if the fort had baths. The creep grabbed her immediately, boasting that they had plenty of hot water and fine scented soaps. Then the mood shifted instantly as Ashing's instincts flared. Hangbin grew serious, shouting for everyone to form a defensive circle before the threat arrived. Even then, Chang kept pressing close to the girl, despite her being visibly uncomfortable with his wandering hands. Ashing might have sensed the danger first, but he couldn't pinpoint the direction. Regardless, he trusted his gut and drew steel. Something was definitely out there. Chang was the first to fall when a sharp barb shot out, piercing his throat before he could even scream. Hangbin panicked immediately. He knew exactly what that strike meant. The eldritch abomination had arrived. Its tentacles retracted, leaving the group paralyzed, until the creature suddenly lunged directly into Hangbin's reach. While the monster tore the group apart, Jiang Ye was calmly harvesting spirit shards from the dead ghouls. Out of the entire horde, 2 ghouls had dropped shards. Not a bad haul at all. He would have kept playing the fool if not for the desperate screams nearby. Hangbin was already a dead man. The beast's tentacles coiled around his entire frame. To finish him, it squeezed until blood sprayed from his eyes and mouth, snapping his leg with a sickening crunch. The refugees were horrified. Even Chang's arrogant bravado had completely vanished. He looked ready to crumble. Sensing he was the last threat, the monster turned its focus toward the only knight left standing. Chang backed away, frozen by cowardice. To save his own skin, he grabbed the innocent girl and threw her into the tentacles. The monster gladly accepted the easy prey. However, this time, it was not going to be a simple kill. It ended with a brutal, crushing blow. But her real savior arrived in style, slicing through the tentacles and pulling the woman to safety. Perhaps Jiang Ye and his short blade truly could slay the beast that everyone feared. Jiang looked the creature over without a hint of fear. This wasn't the true abomination, merely one of its spawn, as the Citadel warriors often called them. The master beast often mutters strange words and can transform ordinary ghouls into these tentacled monstrosities through a dark ritual. Even the great elders would struggle against one alone, or at least that is what Chang believed. And that is where we leave it, a coward fleeing while the real hero steps up to face the darkness alone. All right, you and I are about to watch Alistair realize he has been betrayed by his very own unit. That coward had just thrown him away. The monster's spawn recovered and went after Alistair, furious about those deep cuts. Fresh tentacles wrapped around him, but he didn't even fight back. He was actually curious about how these evolved monsters produce offspring. He stayed dead calm because he had the power to back it up. He wanted to test this nasty creature for himself. The two ended up in a brutal tug of war, with the tentacles straining between them. Then it hit Alistair. He had never really tested the hidden ability he awakened months ago. Today felt like the time. He planted his feet hard. Finally, he triggered his berserker state, pushing his body to a terrifying level at once. The power surge was absolutely insane. Seconds ago, he was only holding even. Now he was dragging that beast across the ground like it was nothing. When it got close enough, he pinned it with a single step. The beast couldn't speak, but its roar sounded pure terror now. Now pay attention here. The only survivor left was in total shock. A scrawny knight was shredding a high-level mutant with his bare hands. By the time Alistair finished the job, its head, limbs, and body were ripped apart and scattered. Alistair walked over and asked the woman if she was okay after nearly being crushed. Seeing all the blood on his face, she screamed in fear. Now she thought he was the real monster here. Alistair wiped his face and smiled, proving he was human. Meanwhile, Arthur and the cowards finally reached the Citadel gates. At the entrance, Baron Thorn, the Duchess, and Cedric met them and asked why Arthur looked wrecked and where the others were. Arthur quickly explained that Henry and Andrew had been killed by a monster spawn. Sir Cedric was the only one who asked about the new guy. Arthur assumed Alistair was dead. No way a rookie survived that. Hearing that his cousin died like that, Baron Thorn was furious. He did not know where to put that rage, so he blamed the survivors. The Baron then started hacking them down on the spot with his hatchet. They were losing control, but the blood finally calmed his rage. Then something interrupted the chaos. A bundle of severed tentacles dropped to the ground and grabbed everyone's attention. They looked up and saw the Citadel's newest knight. Alistair. He and the girl showed up right after the Baron's outburst. The Duchess was surprised and impressed that the rookie came back alive. Not only that, he returned showing off a rescued girl and a pile of tentacles as proof of the kill. He explained that he had taken down the monster spawn and avenged the fallen members of the boss's family. After a feat that massive, the leaders started seeing him differently. Alistair asked for horses and men to help collect the bodies and loot. While he handled that job, the bosses questioned Arthur about what really happened. Even now, that coward still refused to believe Alistair had killed a monster that wiped out the rest of the warriors alone. As far as Arthur knew, even Thorn and the Duchess together would have had a long, bloody fight against it. The Baron was still judging by first impressions. A kid who didn't even take a proper stance shouldn't be this strong. So, the Duchess guessed the monster only got those kills because it attacked the squad by surprise. Still, they couldn't let someone that strong stay unchecked, especially with how close he had gotten to Cedric. Let's pause for a second. The Duchess heard footsteps and silenced the room as Cedric entered with a new proposal for the lords. Then, he suggested making Alistair an officer because of his power. Baron Thorn rejected the idea instantly. They knew nothing about the kid. Duchess Sterling cut him off before he could say another word. The Duchess believed Alistair really had officer-level strength, but he would need to prove his worth to the entire Citadel garrison first. Since they were discussing it, the Duchess suggested testing him against the legendary Kraken monster. If Alistair could kill it, they would solve two problems at once. Cedric angrily said that was unfair. Even both lords together could not do that. The Duchess said it would not be a suicide mission for him alone. It was time to end that legendary threat for good. As soon as he got back from hauling supplies and bodies, the lords explained the plan to Alistair. He was stunned by the sudden trust. The Duchess played to his pride, saying he might be the strongest warrior in the whole settlement. Baron Thorn added that victory meant the third seat on the council. He mockingly asked Cedric if he was fine with being outranked. Cedric forced himself to agree. With that settled, the grand hunt would move in 2 days. Alistair had to admit they were good actors. He might have believed them if his inner sight hadn't revealed their rotten intentions. And that's where we leave the Citadel. Back at the Eastern Keep, trust me, things are getting very ugly. All right, you and I are about to dive into a mission where every single move could be someone's final breath. Silas reported the strategy to bring down the ironworks. In 2 days, they would rendezvous at St. Jude's Park. The time had finally come to purge the final threat from the district. Arthur stepped up to handle the tactical details. They decided old Sam should remain behind since the base needed his wisdom. This raid carried a heavier price than any before. Their elite knights had to be ready. Sir Julian, Sarah, Jack, and the frontline squad would be the deciding factor. Over in the corner, young Billy demanded to join the fray. His mother shut that idea down faster than light. War is for men, not children, she claimed, but she hadn't seen him on the hunt. Billy was no fragile page. Even against the veterans, the boy could hold his own. Arthur needed every blade he could get his hands on. In days like these, boys grow up fast. 2 days vanished in a blink, and the great hunt finally began. Butcher Pete and Lady Vane led the party straight to the lair of that tentacled abomination. Silas, still in his disguise, asked how they would draw it out. Pete told him to keep his shirt on. Pay attention, here is where it gets interesting. He looked toward a ruined tower and caught the signal from the Citadel Guard. Up on the roof, they were armed and waiting. They held their position because the boss had commanded them to stay hidden until the trap was finally sprung. For the moment, they just secured the ropes. Once the chaos erupted, they would descend like hawks from the sky. Down in the mud, Lady Vane summoned a scrawny boy carrying the gear. The lad looked up, trembling with fear. With a serpent's grin, she ordered him into the park. These porters were only meant to be pack mules. Leo couldn't just stand by while she planned something this barbaric. To Lady Vane, no bait worked better than a child. The beast kept wailing for its lost son, so they were going to give it one. She lied and said they would save him when the creature emerged. The starving boy was paralyzed. Pete stepped in. He seized the boy by the neck, snarling a threat. Then, with his unnatural strength, he launched the kid into the woods. The impact must have broken him. High above, Arthur watched through his glass as the pieces of the trap began to move. He gave the sign, and the team began scaling the stone walls with their ropes. In the center of the clearing, the thin boy limped and screamed for help, but only silence answered him. Suddenly, a thunderous voice shook the earth, groaning for its son. At last, the nightmare of the park revealed itself. This tentacled horror looked like Silas's previous kill, but more human. Its glowing eyes were filled with nothing but pure murderous rage. Leo screamed at the commanders to stop gawking and rescue the boy now that the target was in sight. When they didn't flinch, he tried to charge in alone, but Lady Vane blocked him. Silas had to go first. She claimed anyone else intervening would just steal the glory. You and I both know how sick that sounds. Silas just smirked. The charade was over. Before the tentacles could crush the boy, Silas shot forward with the speed of a falling star. He outran the monster, grabbed the kid by the collar, and threw the little bald lad back toward his allies. Julian caught him cleanly. The monster roared at Silas for interfering, but with those fake spectacles gone, Silas was finally back. The tentacles coiled around him, dragging him close. Silas narrowed his eyes, noticing something bizarre about the creature. With the boy safe, Julian prepared to draw his sword, but the corrupt bosses blocked his path before he could help. If they don't strike now, Silas is a dead man. Julian didn't realize that was exactly what they wanted. Lady Vane laughed at him. She figured Silas might at least draw the beast to a tie, but now he was just being crushed. Maybe his first victory was just a fluke. Leo was too blind to see the real setup. Instead of letting those demons talk, Silas spoke up. Without hesitation, he exposed the Ironworks lords for their cannibalistic feasts. Leo stared in shock, clueless as ever. Right then, the Citadel Guard unleashed a hail of lead upon the traitors. Their rifles tore through the air, catching the Ironworks soldiers in a deadly crossfire from the flank. They split into two wings. One pinned down the enemies, while the other rushed to help 𝒂𝒂💐 against the beast. Young Billy led that second squad, holding a volatile firebomb. The kid looked absolutely feral. He threw it with everything he had. The monster swatted it away, but the oil drenched its skin, and the flames roared. But the beast didn't even notice the fire. It just stared at the boy who threw it. It was like a flicker of humanity returned. It completely let go of 𝒂𝒂𝒐𝒅. Meanwhile, the boy was shouting curses because the bomb had not finished it. Hearing Billy swear triggered something deep in the beast. Trust me, you and I are not ready for what comes next. Trust me, this was no ordinary beast. Luckily, they had their own monster too. Sir Cedric charged in. His agility was insane, dancing around those thrashing limbs while they shattered the cobblestones beneath him. The Iron Guild mercenaries took cover, watching in pure disbelief as their greatest nightmare clashed with another creature. A beast protecting humans? It made zero sense. Cedric stayed light on his feet, but he just couldn't land a lethal blow. Suddenly, a wall of flesh hemmed him in. Using nothing but brute force, he ripped the cage apart and broke free. But wait, that was just a feint. The real blow was coming from behind. Without a quick shout from his ally, a jagged spike would have pierced his skull. After a brutal clash, both monsters retreated to catch their breath. Watching Cedric struggle, Arthur, still held captive, actually had the nerve to start laughing and mocking him. Baron Thorn stood frozen. The young brat they found a few days ago was actually joking with a nightmare. Now watch this. Arthur shreds the heavy bindings holding him like they were made of thin paper. Thorn finally noticed the attackers were shouting Arthur's true royal title. Old 𝒂𝒐𝒓𝒊𝒆𝒏𝒅 had warned them that the High Lord of the Eastern Citadel shared that legendary name. Everything clicked. This boy had played them for fools, and this entire hunt was a deadly ambush. The Iron Guild were the ones being hunted by the Citadel's elite forces. Lady Alara scanned the enemy ranks, desperately looking for a way out of this trap. She estimated their champion was only on par with Lord Lucian's strength. But those repeating crossbows gave them a massive advantage. Plus, Arthur himself was the biggest threat. To make matters worse, that masked horror seemed just as powerful as the tentacle beast. Alara knew victory was slipping away. Even a fight would cost them everything. But she had one desperate plan. Thorn needed to keep the Citadel soldiers busy. Those two were veterans who had fought together for years, instinctively knowing how to guard each other. Thorn hurled his great axe with such force it glowed like a falling star. The impact triggered a massive explosion, burying the Citadel forces in a choking cloud of soot and ash. Thorn didn't stop, unleashing a barrage of heavy strikes while his archers provided a rain of arrows. That sheer chaos pinned Lord Liam's men down, forcing them to scramble for any available cover. While the battle raged, Lady Alara locked eyes on a different target. The young squire in front, little 𝒂𝒂𝒐𝒅. Only Kai saw her coming, throwing himself in front of the boy. He tried to raise his guard, but Lady Alara's kick was just too fast for him. The heavy warrior stumbled back, no match for an elite knight. Finally, Alara's prize was within her grasp. She snatched 𝒂𝒂𝒐𝒅's by his tunic, and the whole battlefield went silent. This was their absolute worst nightmare. 𝒂𝒂𝒐𝒅's fought like a wild animal to avoid becoming a pawn, but he couldn't break her grip. To silence him, Alara struck him hard across the face. But that blow didn't just hurt the boy. It triggered the tentacle monster, which let out a soul-shaking roar for its child. The beast went into a blind frenzy. Sir Cedric took that chance to sprint forward and get into position. Leaping onto the creature's massive shoulders, he noticed something weird. The monster was completely ignoring his presence. "I know what you're thinking. Why stop now?" Arthur told Cedric to let the big guy go, sensing the monster was ready to risk its very life for what mattered most. Standing in its path now would be a death sentence. With her dagger at the boy's throat, Alara warned the Citadel knights she would end him unless they dropped their weapons immediately. Sir Liam begged her to take him instead. Seeing the knights in a total panic, Alara felt triumphant. If 𝒂𝒂𝒐𝒅's died here, how could they ever face the Queen Mother back at the stronghold? Alara barked the order again, drop the steel and retreat 100 meters. Liam took the safe path and lowered his crossbow, signaling the others to obey. But she wasn't done yet, ordering their masked monster to slaughter the tentacle beast once and for all. She was so drunk on power that she never saw the incoming strike. The beast launched itself forward like a heavy missile, forcing her to dump the hostage and dive away. A few nearby thugs were instantly torn into pieces. Baron Thorn watched in pure horror as another of his elite knights was turned into a pile of gore. Alara assumed their masked fighter had the beast under control, but when she looked over at Arthur, the boy was just grinning back at her. The monster stood calmly beside him, and honestly, both of them seemed bored by the entire battle. Liam screamed for Silas to run, but the vines had already trapped him. Arthur just told everyone to stay calm. The boy was safe, in the beast's arms, technically. Of course, nobody got the joke while seeing him wrapped in those lethal limbs. But this time, the nightmare held him with incredible tenderness, whispering the word son. And that's where we leave it. Arthur had promised to protect this family, because trust me, they have definitely met this horrifying monster before. Stick with me. You and I are watching a boy recognize the monster his father became, and the heartbreak is absolutely crushing. From the shadows, Lord Thorn realized he was outmatched and signaled a desperate retreat for his men. Unfortunately for the Ironworks crew, they had provoked a beast far beyond their mortal understanding. While shielding his son, Arthur unleashed his tentacles. Lord Thorn was the first to be snared and shattered. He begged Lady Alara to cut him free, but their alliance of convenience died the second things got ugly. Alara didn't hesitate. She bolted for the tree line, leaving every one of her loyal knights behind. Her only hope was to use Cedric as a distraction, praying his death would buy her a few seconds. But karma is fast. The tentacles lashed out, catching her ankles before she could even reach the forest edge. She slammed face first into the stone, her fine glasses and nose shattering upon the cold pavement. She knew her fate was sealed, as she was dragged back toward the monster with zero mercy shown. Thorn actually smirked. Seeing the woman who betrayed him being hauled to her doom felt like true justice. Even in his final moments, Thorn tried to use Silas, the last loyal warrior he had left. Before Silas could move, Julian appeared like a ghost behind him with a simple, chilling offer for the man. Watch this, Julian offered him a deal. Stay still and survive, or join the slaughter starting with Lord Thorn. Thorn's head was hammered into the dirt. That first impact alone was enough to scramble his wicked brain. Then Arthur finished it. The tentacles tore him apart until nothing remained but a heap of flesh and bone. With Thorn dead, Alara was next. Her noble strength meant nothing against those massive, crushing appendages. Her end was slow and agonizing. The pressure mounted until blood leaked from every pore of her terrified body. The grip tightened further, until the proud lady was reduced to a mere pile of gore. It was the ultimate punishment for hurting his son. With the bosses dead, the third volume of this saga ended. Julian earned 80 more points, totaling 151. Finally, the mission's hint about a secret ally made sense. He had gained a monster ally. Then he turned to Silas, who was clearly drowning in questions. Silas asked if Julian led the East stronghold, then brought up the dark whispers of cannibalism from the fight. Julian's answer was cold. Men don't achieve the rank of ascended through luck or divine favor. Silas began to remember his time at the Ironworks, specifically a woman and her small child he protected. He recalled the girl begging for his rations. He had shared his meat freely, thinking it was a kind gesture. Then the horrific truth dawned on him, and he looked ready to lose his mind. Days after sharing that food, the first beast attacks began. The woman he helped had lost her child to them. He finally realized those monster attacks were just a cover story used to slaughter their own helpless people. Let that sink in for a second. The rations given to the elite warriors were actually made from human remains. The Ironworks lords had tricked him into cannibalism just to grant him power. Silas completely snapped. He battered the remains of his dead boss, howling until he was drenched in red. By the end, he looked like he was reborn in blood. Then he bared his teeth at Julian, demanding to know if he gained power through the same evil. Seraphina stepped in to clarify. They weren't monsters, they just knew the secrets of the world better than most. Julian handed him a monster core to prove his point. There were cleaner ways to gain legendary strength. These cores were rare but far more potent. Lacking the dark corruption Silas had surely already started to feel. Those who ascend through dark hunger lose their minds, becoming violent shadows of their former noble selves. Silas couldn't undo what he'd done. He could only vow to never touch human flesh again to stall the madness. As for Arthur, Julian was simply relieved that the father and son were finally reunited in this hellscape. When asked if he could speak, Arthur replied in mangled, gravelly tones that were barely recognizable as human speech. Still, Julian seemed to understand the monster perfectly. Much like Silas, the transformation had broken Arthur's voice but left his soul intact. Still, he'd terrify the stronghold. Arthur was content staying in the ruins as long as his son was safe. He called Julian a genius. With the tyrants dead, the ironworks were left without a lord. Silas was the only one left to lead. So what do you and I take from this? Silas no longer trusted the man he had become. All right, you and I are about to see how a new world order rises from the ashes. Arthur puts Silas in charge of the steel mills, while Leon vows to keep his inner demons locked away within the fortress. While things settled at the park, a nightmare was unfolding on the outskirts of Sterling City. Survivors were running for their lives, as twisted monsters hunted them through a thick, green haze. They had to make heartless choices, abandoning anyone who could not keep up with the group. When those vine monsters strike, you run or you die. The ones left behind met a gruesome end, while the green fog allowed the carnivorous plants to spread like a plague. By the time the feeding frenzy was over, the victims were completely unrecognizable. Then the plant-controlled corpses began to stand. Sterling City was now a living hell. As they fled, the group dwindled until a woman named Alina collapsed. Her partner tried to drag her along, screaming that stopping meant certain death at the hands of the swarm. Suddenly, a strange sound echoed nearby. They listened closely and realized it was the wind, which meant the forest edge was finally within reach. Freedom was so close, but the mutants were right behind them. They could not spare a single second. The couple at the back whispered words of hope. Safety was just ahead. After a few agonizing minutes, they finally spotted a flash of light. But then, a rogue vine with a mind of its own snatched Alina from behind. Now watch this, because everything changes in a heartbeat. The vine hoisted her up, tightening around her neck. It was a massive Venus flytrap mutant, and it struck like lightning. In a spray of blood, her body was torn in half. Her boyfriend lost it, screaming Alina's name as his mind shattered. But the survivors did not have the luxury of mourning her death. The plant mutants were already closing in. Marcus, their leader, slapped him hard to snap him back to reality. Alina was gone, and there was no time to weep. He had to choose, live or die. Finally, they broke through the tree line and entered Meadowvale. The mutants followed, slow, steady, and relentless. They were not fast, but their numbers were endless. Marcus kept pushing forward until he found a familiar landmark. He realized they had reached Meadowvale Royal Woods, but the silence was eerie. No people, no zombies, just emptiness. After the chaos in Sterling City, they assumed the area had been evacuated. Then, they spotted someone hiding behind a pole. The figure did not attack, so they cautiously approached and asked where the local evacuation point was. A fatal mistake. They had just approached Malachar, the abyssal beast. I know what you are thinking, and yeah, they are in deep trouble. Dark skin, void black eyes, and writhing tentacles, it was a total nightmare. They scrambled away in pure terror, only stopping when they thought they were safe. They wondered if the entire kingdom had already fallen. But before they could catch their breath, the plant hunters surrounded them once again. Trapped from every side, the group finally broke. Some even whispered that dying in the forest would have been a quicker end. Maybe Alina was the lucky one. As the mutants closed in, the men drew their blades for one last stand. Marcus was ready to take his own life rather than be eaten alive. Luckily, a hero intervened. 𝒔𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂's tentacles lashed out across the street, ripping the heads off the plant mutants with terrifying ease. This was his territory, and he was not about to let these leafy invaders into his park. Back at Eastguard's stronghold, Arthur stood under the moonlight, admiring his growing empire. His grand utopia plan was finally coming together. His community score reached 62, and his shop points hit 231. Arthur was officially the richest man in the apocalypse. He saw a level 2 deterrence box for 20 points in the daily shop. Or perhaps a black tech box for 50, or a level 3 superpower awakening box for 100. Arthur instantly cleared the shop. The deterrence box granted his army a heavy armored carriage. The tech box held an enhancement serum, and the superpower box contained a level 1 enslavement mark. It was a skill to bind any living soul, but he had no reason to use it. His trusted allies like 𝒔𝒐𝒅 and 𝒔𝒂𝒂𝒂 were already loyal. Suddenly, a new quest appeared. The mission, Weed Control Volume 1, had officially begun for the young Lord of Eastguard. At first, he thought it was just simple gardening work. But when 𝒔𝒂𝒂𝒂 reported the massive army of mutants approaching, the true scale of the mission became clear. That night, the fortress guards gathered at the walls to keep a nervous eye on the abyssal beast. 𝒔𝒂𝒂𝒂 brought the survivors to meet the boss, dragging a mutant plant corpse along as a grim trophy. From the crowd, 𝒔𝒂𝒂𝒂's wife and son ran to him in pure joy. He tried to speak, but only the broken words "marry me" left his lips. Only Arthur understands his broken speech. You and I both know this bond is just beginning. Trust me, you and I are about to witness a kingdom fall. 𝒔𝒂𝒂𝒂 immediately began inspecting the withered blight creature. Sir Alistair struggled to explain the horror, so the captain of the refugees stepped forward to tell the tale. They fled the kingdom of Solas after the killer vines turned their home into a tomb. Mirehaven isn't much safer than Solas, but the journey to the Citadel was still crawling with endless waves of the mindless hollowed. 𝒔𝒂𝒂𝒂 sent a scout to fetch the heavy, enchanted war wagon he had hidden a few blocks away from them. He plans to scout the border tonight, and with their guide, they reached the woods quickly. Only a few hours had passed, yet the cursed vines had already grown much taller and spread farther. To solve the mystery of the rot, 𝒔𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂 wants to head deeper into the jungle, but the survivor guide refuses to return to that nightmare. But ignoring this corruption simply isn't an option. The Iron Forge will be swallowed if this rot keeps spreading, ruining their production and daily lives, so 𝒔𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂 decides that training his people absolutely must come first. He needs his warriors strong enough to survive the coming darkness without his constant protection. Everyone, including the new Forge crew, is heading out for a massive 3-day hunting run. A foul beast is lurking near the forge, greedily feasting on the wandering hollowed. 𝒔𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂 moves through the darkness like a shadow, tonight to end that creature's reign before it causes more trouble. One clean strike kills the monster, letting the rest of the archers finally open fire and cut loose today. They rained enchanted bolts down on the regular hollowed, marching through the ruined city streets. Under 𝒔𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂's command, they searched the fallen and harvested essence crystals, slowly building up their supplies for the coming wars. Now pay attention, because here's where the real danger shows up. A starving ravager was hunting for fresh human meat. Common hollowed are no threat to him at all, but he is sick of eating that rotten, dry zombie flesh. All he craves is the sweet taste of pure human skin. Under Lord Sterling, the Iron Forge has been running well, but their new enchanted weapons are making the guards way too arrogant. Some fools are even wandering past the walls, just to kill hollowed for sport. The Ravager caught their scent and licked his lips, craving the taste of pure humans who haven't yet fed on their own kind. He's smart enough to know their firepower makes a direct charge suicide, so he waits. Okay, I know what you're thinking. He should wait, right? Well, the hunger is making him lose his mind. Back at the Citadel, 𝒔𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂 checks his arcane shop before gathering everyone for an urgent meeting. After 3 days of non-stop hunting, He orders the loot to be divided among the leaders. Lord Sterling objects, saying they shouldn't keep all the crystals when everyone helped with the work. Silas silences him, noting the others already have enough steel and mana to survive. He needs elite champions, not a group of weaklings, so he refuses to spread the crystals thin. Thankfully, his people trust his judgment completely. Silas has never failed them. Now, he has special plans for Lady Seraphina. He takes her to a private chamber alone, leaving her feeling quite nervous about what's next. Outside, the others eavesdrop on the room, only hearing the commander tell the lady to endure the coming pain. The door opens to the snooping group, and Julian awkwardly jokes that Silas finished the job fast. They assume the worst, but it's clear Julian is just being his usual arrogant self. Seraphina holds her arm, while an empty elixir bottle sits on the table, proving she got poked. Julian is a top fighter now, so Silas orders a fierce duel with the newly boosted Lady Seraphina to test her strength. Julian refuses to strike a lady, so Silas tells her to hit him and not hold back. Julian feels very confident in his heavy armor and the power of the crystals he's consumed. Then Seraphina slapped him so hard his jaw nearly shattered, and his whole face twisted in pain. Seraphina is absolutely stunned by her new power. Silas had given her a physical enhancement elixir, making her nearly as strong as Captain Thorn. And of course, Kai couldn't help but laugh at Julian's pathetic, broken state after that blow. Once ready, Silas assigns roles for the forest mission, including the reluctant refugee guide for them. "You and I just saw a nightmare begin. Trust me, it gets worse." He refuses to return. Sir Alaric mocked him for retreating, but the man was done. With no kin or allies left in the capital, he chose to stay in the border keep and work for his bread. So, the broken-hearted soldier volunteered to be their guide into the wilds instead. All right, you and I are watching the western slums now, where a massive awakened is slowly and painfully losing his mind. Without fresh human essence soon, his mind will completely crumble. While clutching his throbbing head in pain, he suddenly caught a distant, rhythmic pounding sound echoing through the ruins. He followed the noise like a predator. Throwing open the heavy iron doors of a derelict manor, he stumbled upon two couples lost in their own wild desires. The massive awakened cleared his throat loudly, forcing them to stop and acknowledge his presence. They all knew his face, and none were pleased. He quickly told them he wasn't there to pillage or steal their meager supplies this time around. He came bearing information, but the women, they didn't trust a single word out of his mouth. In this world, they had all accepted their monster sides, so lying was useless. He swore he found a group of pure-blooded humans, heavily armed and needed backup for the hunt. The corrupted gathered around him, eyes narrowed, weighing every single word he spoke. They agreed to trust him once. If he lied, he'd be their next meal. Just like that, he joined the pack. Then, the flame-haired mutant gave him a very personal welcome, and he definitely wasn't going to say no to that. While that strange scene unfolded, Lord Alaric's elite team finally reached the cursed borderlands. Their guide is Sir Julian, the man still mourning his lost love. Alaric praises his spirit, but Julian only wants vengeance on the monsters that took her. Now pay attention. With his parents still lost in that jungle, Alaric finally takes the lead. Sir Lionel guards the rear. Brothers Silas and Cedric cover the flanks, while Sir Julian is kept safe in the center. Alaric only braved this hell to stop the corruption from spreading. Saving people, that was just a bonus. Suddenly, a wet vine dropped, splashing foul slime across his face. Julian instantly went on high alert. He'd seen that filth before and screamed for his lord to move, but the vine already coiled around Alaric's neck like a serpent. Then the massive Deathbloom emerged, the same beast that bit Sir Gareth in half. No knight had ever escaped its maw until this very moment. Alaric grabbed the vine with his bare hands. He yanked with such divine strength that the creature's rotting heart came flying out. Julian stood frozen, unable to find words. The monster's remains hit the forest floor with a wet, heavy thud before his lord. The guts squirmed like a sack of bloated leeches. Realizing it was outmatched, the Deathbloom tried to slink away. Alaric didn't even bother moving, simply sending Cedric to finish it. The knight didn't let him down. His shadow chains lashed out, snagging the plant. He hauled it back and slammed it into the dirt with force. You saw that green smoke, right? To their surprise, the beast released a gas that didn't feel dangerous at all. It actually smelled sweet, but Alaric grew wary. Mist that pleasant usually signals a very messy death. He tried to warn them, but the light suddenly vanished. Every man was plunged into his own twisted and solitary vision. Julian felt a stabbing pain in his skull. When he looked up, his comrades were all frozen like statues. A rustle came from the thicket. A woman stepped out, calling his name. It was Alina, his lost lady. He remembered her brutal death clearly, so seeing her beautiful face again completely shattered his grip on reality. He stepped forward, caught between hope and madness. Alina beckoned him, claiming the other survivors were just ahead. Lost in the spell, Julian followed her voice. Meanwhile, the siege on the royal armory had finally begun. The corrupted reached the forge, sensing a feast of pure human souls. One of them began drooling immediately. Nothing fueled him like the taste of fresh blood. The others told him to wait, but hunger won. Before they could grab him, he charged. He sprinted blindly into the gate, desperate for a kill without any strategy. The sentries spotted him, but they were too slow. Before their bows were even drawn, one man was already being devoured. The screams alerted Commander Royce. His men had fought ghouls before, but an awakened was a whole different level of nightmare. Their bolts did nothing. Every wound stitched itself together instantly. Ignoring the pain, the hunter continued his feast. He would have slaughtered them all if Royce hadn't arrived, delivering a kick that sent the monster flying through the air. The beast landed on its feet, snarling. At this range, Commander Royce could keep peppering him with heavy mana shells. The fool had to retreat. Close range meant a beating, long range meant certain death. Royce ordered his healers to save the wounded and stem the bleeding. The monster limped back to his pack, bruised, bloodied, and completely humiliated. He collapsed before even reaching them. The pack showed no mercy. They warned him to wait, but he was just too reckless. So that's where we leave it. He just snarled for them to bring meat so he could heal up. Stick with me. We are entering a world where being weak means being left behind. Yet this fool was still arrogant. Fed up with his whining, one of the girls snapped his neck. Fewer mouths to feed meant more meat for the rest. With him gone, the 4 remaining hybrids plotted their way into the Iron Fortress. The girls already had a plan while the boys were thinking. They looked human enough to walk through the gate. Back in the forest, Silas felt a strange, unnatural pull drawing him toward the girl, Alina. The fake was losing her disguise. Before she could strike, a flying blade severed the shapeshifter's head from its body. For the second time in days, Silas had to watch the woman he loved die. Arthur threw that knife. Still shaken, Silas turned his rage toward his own leader for ruining the beautiful illusion. Arthur forced him to look again. Slowly, the bloody vision faded away, and the grim reality revealed itself. It was just a pile of vines. Arthur quickly moved through the group, snapping everyone out of it. Barnaby felt like years had passed, and even the giant mutants had succumbed to the trickery. Arthur guessed the flowers released hallucinogenic gas. To investigate, he sliced open the vine bundle to study its dark core. But here's the kicker. That thing was just a puppet. The real monster was hidden deep underground. Following the roots, he unearthed something strange. It looked like a massive, glowing forest tuber. Probably a storage organ for the plant. Just in case, he stashed it in his magic pocket dimension. He asked Silas about these monsters, but the boy only knew they were deadly and to be avoided. The elder might know. He was an expert from the Royal Institute of Forest Research. The old man was at a high-rise camp nearby. Needing answers, Arthur changed their path to find him. Back at the Iron Fortress, the hybrids put their simple infiltration plan into motion. Scarlet limped to the front gate, acting terrified and broken while making sure her body was on full display. To finish the act, she collapsed. One of the sentries on the wall spotted her. The guards gathered, thinking a survivor was seeking refuge, but their protocol vanished once they caught a good look at her. One guard wanted to report it, but another just wanted her inside. Scarlet cried out, and the fools bought it. From the shadows, the other hybrids watched. Even they had to admit Scarlet was a master of deception. Of course, the other girl refused to be outdone, insisting she could play the part even better. You and I can see the trap is set. Back in the woods, the group struggled through the jungle and finally reached the next city. As they neared the camp, a voice from behind the walls called out Silas's name. It was his Aunt Margaret. Normally, he would have run to her, but after the illusions, he hesitated and stayed back. He rubbed his eyes in disbelief, but Arthur just laughed, saying the gas had already worn off. Inside, the camp was panicking. They could not tell if the people coming out of the trees were friendly. Some wanted to save Silas, while others doubted it was really him. Aunt Margaret decided to strike first. She led her men forward and attacked, hoping to catch the strangers off guard. Silas could have slaughtered them, but Arthur told everyone to stay calm. He swatted away incoming arrows with his bare hands. Then he roared for them to stand down, and the attackers actually stopped. Silas stepped between them, shouting that these people were friends. Aunt Margaret sighed and told her men to stop firing. Silas explained that Arthur's band had traveled from far beyond the jungle. When she asked about his followers, he admitted that half his squad had been slaughtered, including the girl, Alina. When he asked for entry, the townsfolk hesitated. The real issue was the sight of Barnaby and Grendel. Arthur stepped forward to reassure them. He even asked his 2 mutant friends to help calm the crowd. Barnaby unmasked, claiming he was a gentle soul. Grendel just flexed his massive muscles. Arthur was honestly quite embarrassed. He really hoped they would act normal for once. After a long pause, Aunt Margaret let them in. Back at the Iron Fortress, Lady Beatrice returned to the gate and radioed Master Leonard to let her in. Before entering, her sharp senses caught a hostile presence nearby. It was faint and vanished in an instant. The hybrids quickly masked their bloodlust again. Master Leonard opened the door for Beatrice, and the monsters finally relaxed. They were almost discovered. You and I know that Beatrice is a pure evolver, and she is absolutely deadly. Stick with me. You and I are about to see these monsters at their most depraved, hungry to consume her strength. Sarah hurried to the healers to check the knights who were wounded earlier. Arthur had tasked her with guarding the cleansing elixirs, though Lord Leopold seemed quite doubtful about it. The men were bitten hours ago, but showed no rot, meaning the enemy likely wasn't undead. Amidst the total chaos and confusion, Scarlet claimed mutated beasts were gathering in the western moors to hunt down the living. Lord Leopold had never met her, but she spoke with an authority that was hard to ignore. Weeping, Scarlet said these beasts were far smarter than ghouls, and she only escaped on a stolen horse. To Leopold, it sounded like she had lured doom to their gates, while his guards foolishly defended her. Sir Hungly only wanted intel on the foe, so Scarlet warned them to prepare for another brutal siege. Since Scarlet was barely clothed, Lord Leopold told her to seek rest and warmth within the keep. Now pay attention, because even as the others left, Sarah felt something sinister lurking beneath the girl's story. She eventually blamed her nerves on the constant war, as the group reached a spire choked in miasma. Arthur wondered why the survivors picked this cursed tower instead of the fortified castles nearby. The truth was simple: the emerald fog kills. It is thickest near the dirt and turns men into trees. Only rooms 10 floors up are safe enough. As they climbed, Arthur met the sage and explained the wild lands and the fall of the cities. Afterward, he introduced Sir Cedric and Silas to the refugees huddled within the cold stone walls. As for the coastal realms or the northern kingdoms, there was no word of any royal rescue. Everyone was on their own. Then, Arthur showed the sage a strange tuber he had unburied earlier. The sage called it a blightroot. It was edible, and the people here had survived on it for months. Without the starvation, they never would have dared to eat something so vile and corrupted. Their talk was cut short by a sudden alarm. Without the starvation, they never would have touched something so vile, but finding food was a major victory. Watch closely. Their peace is shattered as a massive horde of blight beasts starts gathering around the tower walls. They called these horrors the 𝑨𝒑𝒂𝒂𝒍𝒚𝒑𝒔𝒆, a name that made the sage's face turn pale with fear. He ordered the women and children to the highest chambers and commanded the doors be sealed tight. Anyone who could hold a blade had to arm up, for he would rather save some than none. His subjects obeyed without a second thought, ready to bleed for the only home they had left. The sage thought Arthur was too young for war and told him to hide, but Arthur laughed. He was actually curious about the beast that had everyone this terrified, though the sage warned that they were as good as dead. The 𝒑𝒂𝒂𝒍𝒚𝒑𝒔𝒆 controls the other beasts. It uses a dark scent to lead the charge, and the sage was horrified when Arthur opened the window. Arthur pulled an enchanted heavy crossbow from his dimensional pouch, ready to test the enemy's tough hide. From high above, he started sniping the vine beasts one by one, watching as their deadly wounds healed back together in moments. Arthur wanted to find their breaking point, so he riddled a single beast with dozens of bolts. Like the others, it stood defiant for a moment, but finally the creature collapsed into the dirt. It took 2 full quivers to kill just one. No wonder the entire kingdom lived in constant terror. But Arthur had endless weapons and bolts in his magic space, and pulling out dozens of crates stunned the poor survivors. He then smashed open the supply crates with his bare hands, further shocking the desperate refugees. Inside were fire jars, the natural enemy of the brambles. He told them to burn any that entered. Without another word, he leaped from the window, and his 2 brothers followed him into the abyss. Trust me, you and I just saw them jump 16 floors and land perfectly in front of those plant monsters. The creatures charged them immediately, but Arthur simply drove his fist through a monster's wooden skull. With one violent yank, he tore the head away. 𝒍𝒐𝒅 proved to be just as dangerous a fighter. He was fast and lethal, fighting exactly like his master, while 𝒐𝒂𝒂𝒍𝒚𝒑𝒔𝒆 used his dark tentacles to cause pure, brutal chaos. Stick with me. We are about to see Julian realize how wrong he was about Arthur's true power. Luckily, Captain Leo was rallying the survivors above. He took command, ordering the brave to grab fire flasks and hold the stone stairs against the monsters. For the first time in months, those trapped in the tower felt a spark of hope rising from below. Arthur cut down the last of the blighted plants. Then he ordered his monstrous brothers to scavenge the corpses for mana cores. He was determined to track down the 𝒑𝒂𝒂𝒍𝒚𝒑𝒔𝒆 personally. Any beasts that broke through were burned to ash, and thanks to Arthur's squad, not a single life was lost. While the others secured the tower, Arthur followed his gut deep into the woods until he found their greatest nightmare. The 𝒑𝒂𝒂𝒍𝒚𝒑𝒔𝒆. This was the source of Silverton's horror, the beast choking the air with that toxic green fog. Suddenly, Arthur's survival instinct flared. He trusted that feeling and threw himself aside, barely dodging a lethal strike. The impact was as heavy as 𝒐𝒂𝒂𝒍𝒚𝒑𝒔𝒆 tentacles. Fortunately, he'd become an expert at killing whip-like monsters lately. He just had to crush it. Sensing a threat, the carriage released a suffocating cloud of toxic spores. Nice try, but Arthur wasn't falling for the same trick twice. He took a deep breath and held it before the green clouds hit. As the air thickened, the carriage began to writhe and squirm violently. Its wooden chassis split open, and horrific legs sprouted from underneath. Now pay attention here. It tries to flee on those gross legs, but Arthur isn't letting it go. He weaves a sigil and activates the brand of submission. Arcane energy bound the beast. Moments later, the survivors in the tower watched in shock as the carriage rolled toward them like a loyal pet. Master Julian trembled. He remembered exactly how many people that twisted abomination had slaughtered. After taming his new servant, Arthur returned calmly, asking 𝒐𝒂𝒂𝒍𝒚𝒑𝒔𝒆 and Leo if the mana cores were collected. 𝒐𝒂𝒂𝒍𝒚𝒑𝒔𝒆 grunted a confirmation in his warped, monstrous voice, while Captain Leo translated the report for them. One monstrous ally sounded like he was chewing gravel, and the other was even harder to understand. Communication was exhausting, Then Julian asked the burning question. Why was that horrific carriage sitting outside the gates? Arthur simply replied that it was now on their side. To prove it, he led the terrified survivors outside to show them the beast was harmless. Master Julian forced himself to approach the wooden monster. You and I saw this coming. He touches it, asking how Arthur tamed the beast. Ignoring the praise, Arthur asked for the scholar's academic opinion. Julian noted that despite the horrific corruption, the creature likely still followed the primal, basic instincts of nature. Flora competes just as ruthlessly as any predator, but instead of meat. They battle for sunlight. Great oaks grow taller to steal the sun, while lesser weeds must adapt to survive. That is why deep forests are barren below. He guessed the carriage turned violent because it lost its natural advantage during the blight. Starved of light, it adapted to feed on living flesh instead. Suddenly, the carriage extended a vine toward Arthur. Captain Leo instantly drew his dagger, ready to strike down the monster to protect his lord. Arthur told him to stand down. With the brand of submission active, the creature was incapable of betrayal. The vine reached for his neck. Upon contact, it sent a surge of information directly into his nervous system. The beast confirmed Julian's domain, had become a war zone for blighted plants that now hunted man and animal. Now that this behemoth served him, its survival was Arthur's weight to carry. In a display of loyalty, the carriage opened its heart to reveal a glowing core, offering its essence to its new master. The moment Arthur touched the core, it merged into his very body. Leo grew concerned, but this was just a ritual sealing the bond between master and servant. To test his newfound strength, Arthur flicked his wrist forward. A swarm of vines erupted from the ground with immense power, coiling around a massive tree and crushing it tight. With a single thought, Arthur snapped the trunk. Silas stood frozen, realizing these vines were even deadlier than his own tentacles. In that moment, Arthur unlocked the Thorns achievement and gained 150 points. While Silverton was being reclaimed, the Iron Fortress came under attack from a mysterious new threat. Rose, the cannibalistic blight, kept laying deadly traps that the fortress survivors walked right into. Hearing a knock, she put on a mask of helplessness and opened the door for a man bringing a midnight snack she found very delicious. She was a master at playing the damsel in distress. The fool played the hero, acting all worried about the new girl. Rose pulls him close with a seductive thank you. And trust me, you and I know exactly what happens to this hero next. All right, stick with me, because you and I are about to see a seductive spider catch a very stupid fly right now. But that was a ruse. Rose simply wanted to move things outside because the castle walls were thin. Naturally, he followed her. It worked like a charm. Outside the smithy, they made enough noise to drown out the world. By the time it was over, the man was utterly bewitched. They had already shared a night of passion, yet the fool had not even bothered to ask for her name. Then the mood shattered when he noticed something nearby. A torn sleeve from his comrade's tunic was poking out of a filth-covered barrel. When he pried off the lid, he found a gruesome mess of mangled organs and bloody remains that were barely recognizable as human. That was when Rose struck, sinking her talons deep into his throat. At least the poor wretch had one final thrill before she devoured him. Outside the fortress walls, Rose's treacherous pack was still lurking in the shadows nearby. Cedric, the brute, was caught dozing and took a heavy blow to the skull. He was supposed to be on watch, and Earl Baldwin had no patience for lazy sentries. Every second counted. They had to be ready for the moment Rose finally gave the signal to storm the gates. Pay attention here, because this is where the pack turns on itself when Lady Alina grows anxious about Rose keeping the meat for herself. So the three of them crept around the perimeter of the fortress to track down their selfish traitor. Their keen sense of smell led them straight to barrels overflowing with gore. It was official. Rose had gone rogue. Alina claimed the solution was simple. If Rose could charm her way inside, so could she. Baldwin detested the plan. One greedy glutton was already one too many. Sending another spy in seemed like madness. Cedric stepped between them, arguing that Alina's idea actually made sense. She was their only hope of infiltrating the walls now. Even Baldwin had to admit she was right. He finally relented, but warned that if Alina betrayed them like Rose, he would charge in and execute both traitors personally, even if it cost him his life. After more talk, they reused the plan. Lady Alina put on her best act as a helpless maiden and hammered at the fortress gates. The sentries at the entrance leveled their crossbows. Through fake tears, Alina claimed she had barely escaped a horde of ghouls with her life. The guards looked her over and grew excited, gloating about finding another beauty so soon after the first one arrived. Some even whispered that Alina had the more alluring figure of the two. They were about to let her in without a search when Rose suddenly emerged, screaming for them to stop. She claimed Alina was the monster that tried to kill her before. Rose wailed for the guards to slay the flesh-eating witch immediately. Trusting her words, the guards loosed a volley of bolts into Alina, driving her back from the gate. She felt the cold steel tear through her flesh, leaving fatal wounds. Riddled with holes, she stumbled and accidentally exposed the horrifying truth hidden beneath her noble dress. The guards hurried inside to fetch oil to burn the corpse. That gave Alina just enough time to drag herself away and escape. Somehow, all three left without guarding her, while they reported everything to Duke Alaric and Duchess Seraphina. By then, Alina had already crawled back to her group. After using every ounce of her strength to return, she fell unconscious at their feet. Knowing she was broken, Alina begged for her life, swearing total obedience. Baldwin showed no mercy. They were monsters of the same breed, and failure meant death. He hoisted a massive boulder above his head with a single hand. They could always devise another scheme to steal the settlement's winter stores. You saw that coming, right? Before he could crush her, Baldwin was the one who tasted steel when Cedric slit his throat from behind. Baldwin's head tumbled to the dirt. Cedric licked the bloody blade clean, relishing the taste of his former leader. Alina thanked him repeatedly, and he told her she could have the Earl's arm and leg to heal. He intended to feast on the rest of the body himself. Alina knew greed was his only motive. By slaying Baldwin, he seized command and the lion's share of the meat. Back inside the fortress, the noble leaders finally realized that more and more of their subjects were going missing. Duke Alaric was under immense pressure. What kind of sovereign allows such disappearances to happen right under his nose? Fed up with the mystery, Duchess Seraphina decided to investigate herself. She searched the outer grounds of the castle for any trace. It didn't take long for her to stumble upon the gore-filled barrels packed with butchered remains. She summoned her knights, who confirmed a shredded tunic was in the offal. They even found a discarded boot floating in the blood. Rose began to feel trapped. Baldwin's group must have discovered her dumping ground and left the evidence for the nobles to find. Seraphina found no signs of a struggle. Since the night had been silent, she turned to the newcomer and demanded an explanation. Realizing her mask slipped, Rose began to tremble. Her feminine charms would not work on Seraphina. The Duchess drew her sword and lunged, aiming for Rose's heart. And that's where we leave it, trust me. You'll want to see Rose dodge that blade with her inhuman, supernatural speed. Stick with me. You and I are about to watch a hunt turn into a total bloodbath. Lady Sarah had been suspicious of Rose from the start. Rose knew her masquerade was over. Her scheme to feast on the innocent had failed, so in a desperate panic, she lunged at the nearest guard. She drew a hidden dagger and took him hostage, screaming that she would slit his throat if anyone moved an inch. Lady Sarah shouted back that if Rose spilled one more drop of their blood, she wouldn't be leaving these woods alive. Rose couldn't stand being trapped by a young noblewoman. If it came down to it, she'd ensure she dragged a few souls into the abyss with her. She backed away slowly, still threatening to end her hostage. Once she was clear, Rose snatched the man's repeating crossbow and kicked him away. She fired a bolt into his leg, just for spite, and fled the iron works. Keeping her nerves steady, Sarah raised her crossbow and took aim. She fired and struck the cannibal several times. Rose kept running even as her lifeblood began to pour from the fresh holes in her body. Not wanting her to escape, Sarah rushed for her horse to hunt her down, but Sir Leo stepped in to stop her. They didn't know if Rose had accomplices waiting in the shadows, so the entire stronghold had to be locked down immediately. Sarah wasted no time, ordering a much stricter screening for any new survivors seeking refuge at their gates. Newcomers would stay in quarantine at the gatehouse, while she rode back to the high citadel to report the growing threat. Honestly, Sir Leo was stunned by how decisive she was in such a mess. Back in the eastern woods, the regular blighted corrupted were still wandering aimlessly. Now watch this, Lord Jack is testing his new powers. Leading the charge, he tore through enemies using vines and tentacles. For two monsters of their caliber, clearing out the entire area was basically an effortless afternoon walk. That allowed Charles and Liam to gather the mana cores and burn the remains. Soon, a massive bonfire fed by the corrupted lit up the night sky. Master Alaric wasn't sure whether to feel safe under their protection or terrified by the sheer pressure of how strong his savior had become. Lord Jack's mission to build a new kingdom was speeding up and earning him massive rewards. His whole inner circle was in top form. With the forest blights no longer a threat, Jack's party and the refugees finally reached the towering walls of the high citadel. Baron Arthur welcomed them home and quickly updated the young lord on every detail that had transpired during his time away. Jack introduced the survivors led by Master Henry from the Royal Academy. For now, the entire group would find sanctuary within the fortress. Once things were ready, they planned to move to the edge of the city jungle and build a third outpost there. Just then, Sarah arrived on her mare. She urgently reported the horror at the ironworks and suggested the same tight security for the capital. Master Henry's group wouldn't need the strict screening since the Lord himself had already vouched for their loyalty. When Jack heard the ironworks had lost a few people, he didn't even look concerned. In fact, he saw it as good news. The more danger his kingdom faced, the bigger his divine rewards became. Right on cue, the fourth stage of the Villain Vanquisher quest began. Purging the western borderlands would earn him 120 points. Meanwhile, Rose barely made it back to her hideout after escaping with her life. Then she heard footsteps, and her dark heart skipped a beat. It was the recovering Lady Bianca standing over her, and laughing at how miserably the red-headed traitor had failed. Broken and crawling back to the same people she had betrayed, Rose tried to claim it was all just a big misunderstanding. But after nearly getting Bianca killed, death was the only fair price. Bianca told the ogre to beat Rose to death so they could eat her. You saw that betrayal coming, right? Well, think again. The ogre swung his iron mace at Bianca instead, attacking his own teammate from behind. Bianca should have known better than to ever turn her back on a monster like him. Knowing she was finished, Bianca warned Rose not to trust him. He only helps himself and will betray anyone the second it benefits him. Rose didn't care about the warning, as long as she wasn't the one getting her head smashed in. In one last attempt to survive, Bianca tried reminding him that Rose was a traitor, too. But for cannibal mutants, words mean nothing. When that failed, Bianca even offered him her body. Too bad for her. The ogre always preferred redheads over blondes. He killed her with his bare hands. Then he did his usual trick, giving Rose an arm and a leg to heal while he ate the rest. Back at the high citadel, the leaders were talking about the savage cannibals roaming through the western borderlands. Sir Cedric had once been an unaware cannibal himself, but Sarah's report made it clear these new ones were far worse. They had lost every human limit, selfish, reckless, and completely hooked on the taste of human flesh. Jack marked them as a problem for later, but for now, Sir Liam would head back to the ironworks to fix the security issues. 2 months passed without any major trouble, allowing the new kingdom to finally breathe. Deep in the woods, a group of survivors realized they had to move or die. They packed their meager supplies and set out through the forest. So what do you and I take from this? Survival is a night game. They left under the stars, hoping to avoid the monsters. Stick with me, because you and I are about to watch a group of survivors fight for their lives against a swarm of monsters. Fleeing only to find themselves cornered, they noticed one path remained, but haunting groans echoed from the darkness ahead. Facing certain death, they plunged into the unknown. Miles later, the remaining survivors collapsed from sheer exhaustion. Suddenly, a massive oak came crashing down right toward them. They scrambled away, terrified of what beast could topple a tree. Through the dust, they saw knights using serrated blades. A survivor spotted Sir Julian in the group. Commander Silas was stunned to find his old friend, Lord Lawrence. He spoke of their new stronghold in Meridiana, but the screeching of blight vines approaching cut the reunion short. Seeing Lawrence panic, Silas just laughed and told him not to sweat a few overgrown weeds. He pulled out a signal stone, calling in a sighting. Then he told Lawrence's group to step back and watch the show. Moments later, the fire guard arrived with heavy incendiary wands. Lawrence and his men were absolutely speechless. The guards formed a line and unleashed hell, turning those monsters into a massive bonfire. As the beasts shrieked in pain, the kingdom's champions arrived, Sir Victor, the Bound Knight, and Sir Jay. For threats this week, they barely needed to lift a finger. Lawrence was shocked by their power, and it was all thanks to the vision of Lord Arthur. Watch closely. Lawrence sees Lady Alina with 2 monsters and absolutely loses his mind. Silas just shrugged off his fear, inviting Lawrence to join the outpost and meet the legendary Lord Arthur himself. The third stronghold on the forest edge was thriving. They'd even managed to build a massive, working farm. Lawrence was floored. While he'd been hiding, these people were farming in a monster-infested jungle with strange crops. They were harvesting the blight itself. When Lawrence touched a glowing, mutated tuber, he panicked and threw it across the field. Silas explained these crops shared the monster's DNA, but Master Hector magically altered them into high-yield food sources. This miracle was only possible thanks to the vision of Lord Arthur and Master Hector. Together, they turned a nightmare into a reliable food supply. With Arthur's unique bond to the bloom soul, altering the plant's nature was simple work. The harvest was nearly ready, and the expansion into the wilds was going perfectly. With the farm stable, Arthur turned his eyes toward the Reavers. You and I both know peace never lasts for long. At the border of Meridiana, 2 figures walked as if they owned the land, Lord Arthur and the Bound Knight. The muzzled knight warned his master they were being followed. Arthur could tell the group stalking them was roughly as strong as Julian's elite guard. The plan: let the knight feed. Hidden nearby, the Reavers Scarlet and Titan were waiting for their chance. Before Scarlet could charge, Titan grabbed her arm, stopping her from a suicidal blind attack. From their hiding spot, he saw they were late. Another pack had already surrounded the targets. A massive swarm of flesh-seekers closed in on Arthur. They were literally drooling over such high-quality prey. These rabbits had never seen a pure soul like Arthur. They thought devouring him would grant them godhood. Since the Bound Knight followed him, they assumed Arthur possessed the power to command the undead. They wanted that power. Scarlet could only grit her teeth and retreat, letting the stronger pack take the lead. Titan decided to stay and watch the show. Within 60 seconds, the street below exploded into pure carnage. The Bound Knight tore through them like a starving beast. Arthur moved with icy precision, claiming heads with every strike. The survivors of that pathetic squad fled the moment they realized they were actually the ones being hunted. One unlucky Reaver tried to escape by climbing towards Scarlet's hiding spot, putting the Watchers in mortal danger. If Arthur looked up, they were finished. Their hearts stopped when he hoisted a massive steel beam effortlessly. He launched it with deadly aim. The beam pierced the fleeing Reaver through the spine, shredding him instantly. No one survives Arthur's wrath. Scarlet and Titan were nearly hit, drenched in the gore of their fallen ally. Sheathing his blade, Arthur was satisfied with the spoils. This was a decent haul for a morning walk. These Reavers carried powerful monocores. Above them, Scarlet and Titan didn't dare breathe until the monster departed. Once they were certain the young lord and his muzzled knight had finally vanished into the distance. They realized their patience had paid off. A feast of high-quality Reaver corpses was waiting for them. As they patrolled the border, Arthur sensed a presence. Trust me, you and I are going to want to see what's next. All right, let's see how Silas handles this unexpected encounter. A shadow emerged from the darkness, pointing a heavy crossbow with trembling hands. One look told Silas this wasn't a knight, just a terrified commoner trying to protect his life. Even with the iron bolt leveled at them, Arthur looked absolutely terrified. Silas tried to talk him down, but the poor guy panicked and fired a bolt. A simple bolt was no threat to a master like him. Silas caught it midair, completely shattering Arthur's confidence. Seeing his only weapon neutralized left the man paralyzed. In a flash, Silas crossed the entire distance in a single, impossible stride. To prevent any further accidents, he simply snatched the crossbow away. He ignored the man and called the others out, promising he wasn't a monster. Now watch closely, 12 terrified commoners were hiding there, all scared to death and praying for a savior. In this crumbling world, Silas was shocked they hadn't resorted to eating human flesh. For the moment, he decided to escort them through the night. Arthur explained they were heading for Stonehaven Citadel in the southern reaches. They had heard whispers that the fortress was finally open to survivors seeking a safe haven. But they soon realized the borderlands were crawling with hungry, corrupted monsters. Then, rumors reached them of another sanctuary in the north that was actively purging the dark hordes from the land. They called it Ironhold, led by a warrior so powerful he could slay 6 monsters alone. You and I know exactly who they mean. Still, over 1,000 flesh-eaters haunted the western woods. One night couldn't protect everyone. Arthur believed the mutated hunters usually traveled as lone wolves. But not everyone agreed with him. Arthur argued that if the monsters ever united, the commoners would have been wiped out. But one man refused to believe him. He was determined to reach Ironhold Citadel to find his missing brother, even with zero hope. He also feared that the knights at Ironhold might be monsters themselves. Arthur wasn't entirely wrong. The previous lords of that fortress were absolute nightmares. But their new master was standing right in front of them. Silas calmly explained that he had executed the Dark Lords and liberated the entire region for good. You and I just witnessed an incredible reunion, as he wept, naming his brother Leo, a fallen captain.